Yes, and Jane and Catherine will join us in due course.
Andy,
Okay.
we're good to go. We're good to go live, Andy.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Forensics Committee of the new financial year. We've got a very crowded agenda today with a number of reports for scrutiny and also some for decision as well. What we don't have in front of us this morning is the HMICS report into drug driving. And the reason for that is that that was initiated by the board and by particularly the chair of the board. And it's right and proper that it goes back to the board in the first instance for them to decide where to take that. I understand also that audit and risk have a role to play in overseeing all of the HMICS reports that come to the Scottish Police Authority. But I am also sure that at some stage in the very near future, we will have something up to the Forensics Committee about the HMIC report and our responses to that. Maybe Fiona will touch in a little bit more depth about that when we get to drug driving. I'm pleased to say we're joined by a number of guests this morning. We've got from Police Scotland, CS Conrad Trickett, who's here for item 8, DCS Raymond Brown, who's representing ACC Beth Smith, who's unfortunately had to give her apologies. Welcome also to Ruth McQuaid from the Crown Office. And Brian Johnson from HMICS has indicated he's going to try and join us. I couldn't see him on the call a couple of minutes ago, but he'll hopefully manage to join us at some stage during today's proceedings. I've apologies from Gary Holcroft of Forensic Services, Scott Brown from the SPA, Barry Sillers and Amanda Coulthart are able to assist us from the SPA with any queries for the SPA perspective. And also from ACC, Beck Smith, and I've indicated DCS Raymond Brown is stepping in to our shoes for the meeting today. So first thing is then, do we have any declarations of interests or connections to the business in front of us today? Nope, seeing shaking of heads, and I don't have any either. Do we have any other business that anyone is going to want to raise towards the end of the meeting so we can know what's coming? Nope, not seeing that either. Thank you. Then we have the decision at 1.5, the decision to take items in private. And it says here items 9 to 12, but on discussion with the director, she believes the strategic workforce plan can be taken in the public session. This is all in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders, by the way. The strategic workforce plan is item 10. So would members be agreeable to item 9, 11 and 12 being taken in private? Okay, do that then. And what I suggest then is that the strategic workforce plan is taken just after the forensic service people report, which is at item 5. So we'll take that just after that because it sits more neatly together in terms of the subject matter today. Okay, moving on then, we've got the minute of the previous meeting, the action logs and matters arising. So the minute is 2.1. Can we agree that as a correct record? Excellent. We've got 3 actions proposed for closure and 1 action proposed as ongoing. Do we have any questions about those? Can we agree those then? Oh, Fiona McQueen.
Chair, I don't know if you want to take the actions proposed for closure only and then go on to the other actions, but I had 2 or 3 queries about the matter on the actions. If I could raise them.
Just raise it now, yeah.
Please, thanks very much indeed. So in terms of the performance report is due for closure at the next meeting, so I would like to understand the rationale behind that, but happy to take that with the paper and performance report in terms of what we're thinking of. Have we got a sufficiency of confidence in the way that the performance report is going to be presented? I'd be interested if someone could say a bit more about the trend data in terms of the proposal of presenting trends, because I think that's really important. And then there were 2, the biometrics landscape and also the benchmarking have been ongoing for quite a while, and I would find it helpful to better understand what our intentions are with these. Either we think we're just not going to get anything at the moment, so we could take them off, or is there a time scale that we're expecting to hear updates on that? That's all from me.
First one, the performance reporting. Could I suggest we keep it open until we get to the agenda item, and we'll return to that.
Of course.
Regarding the other points, Fiona Douglas, can you perhaps shed some further light on that?
Sure. So the two further items that you raised there, Fiona, related to the biometrics landscape and also to the benchmarking. I believe if there was anything else, please remind me. With regards to the biometrics landscape, the action there relates to forensic services being able to weed Scottish fingerprints in compliance with legislation. That requires a change to be made in the PNC in England and Wales. We have been working very closely. In fact, we've had a member of staff seconded to the Home Office to support this work. However, there was priority one work that Q-jumped the activity that we had planned. So that has introduced a delay. We don't have a huge amount of control over the prioritisation of PNC development work. It's expected that that work will now be completed in July. That will allow us to then roll out the self-weeding of Scottish fingerprint records within forensic services and allow Scotland to have control of that process, which is ultimately what we're trying to achieve. There are further benefits that will follow. So it is imminent within the next couple of months that we would expect those changes to be made to PNC to allow us to undertake that activity. With regards to benchmarking, we have made progress around benchmarking, and it might be helpful for Derek Scrimger as head of function for scene examination to quickly jump in to give an update, because that's the area that we're initially focusing on, is the benchmarking of our scene examination performance. Derek, could you provide some update?
Certainly, Fiona, and thanks, Chair. Yes, at the moment we've contacted 5 different police areas down south to try and gather data. The Met, Surrey, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire, and that data has come back. So we've done some provisional analysis. We're looking at service level agreements, sampling strategies, footwear evidence, trace evidence, and also performance data, obviously, in terms of what their turnaround times are, etc. So that data has been gathered from most areas. The Met, we are yet to receive their data, but we're speaking to them on that. So that analysis is ongoing at the moment, but we don't have any results or conclusions to provide at this point in time.
That's really helpful, Fiona and Derek. Thank you very much. And Chair, I'm wondering whether, because these updates are, I think, very helpful for us to know.
Yeah.
They're good updates to have and to have on the record. And I'm wondering if as we go forwards, if I don't want to overly burden people, but actually just a few sentences in the ongoing action log would be helpful from a governance perspective, I think.
I absolutely agree with you on that. That would be very helpful, and get that on the record. And we'll return to the item relating to performance when we get to the performance reporting. The other thing I forgot to say is we're joined also by the chair of the SPA, Martin Evans, who's going to be sitting and observing for the first hour. So welcome, Martin, also. Okay, so if we can agree those closures of the 3 items, and we'll come back to the 4th in due course. That then moves us on to the next item, which is the Forensic Services Director's Report, which is Fiona Douglas. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take a couple of areas of my report to provide an update to members. Starting with the budget, so it has been an unsettling period of time for staff within the organisation, and a considerable amount of work has been done with colleagues in finance and others across the SPA. And it's good that we now have a settled budget for this financial year, and it allows us to move on with confidence, I think, for this year, and in particular concentration on delivering a significant number of efficiencies that allow us to reinvest in our new operating model for forensic services. We have made good progress with regards to the change programme in forensic services, and there'll be an update later on in the agenda around this. There has been some delay as a result of the budget discussions in terms of being able to provide staff with an update, particularly around timescales for implementation. However, it has now been possible to update all staff, and the change team, and Joanne Tierney, our head of change and development, has been out on a roadshow talking to our staff about how the implementation of the new operating model is going to progress through this financial year. It's really pleasing for me to be able to update members that our national tasking unit went live on the 3rd of April. That new tasking unit is a new team, and it's based in our Rushton Court Laboratory in Dundee. It's now fully up and running and has been for a number of weeks. The unit is a single point of contact for Police Scotland to request scene attendance. It triages those requests and looks at professional deployment of resources and scene examiners out across Scotland nationally, which we're confident will drive improvements in efficiency and the effectiveness of the services that we offer. So this is one of our first key milestones in relation to implementation of the operating model, and Alan Connell is in the meeting this morning, and he's been leading on that. But it's really good to see the unit thriving. It's up and running. It's doing a good job, and the feedback from Police Scotland in terms of the ease of use of that service has been very good. With regards to UCAS and our accreditation, we have had very positive feedback from UCAS at both visits to our Junction 24 laboratory in Govan and also the Howden Hall laboratory, where they reviewed our progress around our toxicology services. So it's really good to see that the progress that the teams in those sites have made is recognised by UCAS, our accrediting body, and both visits have been very positive. It's particularly pleasing in Junction 24 that's the initial inclusion of Junction 24 as a laboratory on our scope of accreditation. As the chair indicated, the HMICS assurance review was published, and we are now working through how best to manage the development of action plans around recommendations with our strategic partners. And again, further information will be available shortly, and the report itself will be presented to the authority meeting. I have previously highlighted the important work carried out by the cold case review team to members, and particularly I note within my report the Brenda Page trial, which really highlights work that was carried out in forensic services over 45 years, both by current and former colleagues, to help secure the conviction. We do have around about 25 ongoing cold cases that are being reviewed within forensic services, and it's really important work where we can apply some new technology and new techniques to some of these more historical investigations. You'll be aware that forensic services staff, including myself, joined colleagues from Police Scotland and other organisations at the Policing and Trauma Conference on the 21st of April. It was certainly, from my own perspective, quite powerful to listen to colleagues' experiences in particular that were presented at that day, and also, really getting to grips with the impact of traumatic scenes that forensic services staff do attend and the impact of that on psychological health. As part of our commitment within our forensic strategy to ensure the well-being of forensic services staff, we have made good progress in this period in awarding a contract for our psychological supervision pilot. And finally, you will soon receive an invitation from me to the Forensic Services Excellence Awards for this 2023 year, which is our inaugural Forensic Excellence Awards, which we plan to hold in Stirling in September. I hope that you'll be able to join me as we celebrate the world-class work that the 600 staff within forensic services deliver for the justice sector and for the people of Scotland. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Fiona. Do board members have any questions for Fiona? Caroline?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Fiona, as always, for your fulsome report. That was good to hear, and lots of good updates there. The point I really highlighted to me when I read your report was the tasking unit. And I just want to say congratulations. I think this is one of many programs that are in train, which was going to enable you to have a much sort of holding the reins of the business a lot tighter, and also give visibility to partners on pipelines and how we're managing them. So I just wanted to say that's a great job, well done. And I think it's something that we should be kind of expanding upon going forward. But I just wanted to say great job. So I think that's really, really helpful for where we're going with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Fiona McQueen.
Thanks, Chair. And, you know, like Caroline, updates incredibly helpful. Fiona, want to commend, you know, your leadership with regards to the trauma enabled work that you're taking forwards, and obviously the contributor from Forensic Services, you know, very powerfully put forward some of the issues that have to be addressed by members of staff. So thank you for all of that. I've got a number of queries, if I can give you them in a list rather than go back and forward. You talk about efficiency savings, and we know that that's important for you to continue with the transformation programme, and I'd be interested to understand if these are on track and you're able to take the efficiency savings out in order to invest. There's clearly a lot of transformation, and you talk about changing, you know, team engagement. So I would be interested in how that's going, and how the trade unions are being involved, and how staff are responding to that. Tasking service, again, congratulations. I notice it's closed out of hours, so I'd be interested to hear, you know, if Police Scotland are needing a scene of crime examiner at 2 in the morning, how that works. And then your cold case, again, it's amazing to see, but I'm interested if there is a queue, if there's a waiting for further resources for cold case examination. I know that when the committee were out for a development session, it was very, very helpful to be taken through that. But I wonder if you could remind me of how cold cases are dealt with, and whether or not there's a backlog of cold cases waiting to be examined.
Thank you, Fiona. So yeah, I think your first area that you asked about were the efficiency savings. So we have a comprehensive efficiencies plan. Again, Alan Connell leads on that for Forensic Services. Primarily, our efficiency savings are around non-staff costs, particularly around more efficient use of some of the very expensive materials and consumables we have within the forensic process. There's also activity around rationalising our DNA processing facility. So at the moment, we carry out DNA processing at all 4 of the main laboratory sites. I am excluding Junction 24, which is our 5th site now. So rather than having DNA processing at 4 sites, we're reducing that to 2. And that has associated savings in both in terms of accreditation of those processes, but also more effective use of automated technology, which reduces the unit costs for each DNA sample that we process. So that's an important project. Alongside that, there are improvements in how we use our technology around DNA profiling. Some of that's around methods which we use. Some of it is around utilising some of the newly implemented DNA techniques, particularly how we can now identify the amount of male and female DNA that's present in a sample, so we can make more intelligent decisions about which type of DNA profiling that sample then is processed through. Rather than putting it through 2 routes, it can just go through 1, is probably the most straightforward way that I can explain it. So those are the types of areas that we have, as well as looking at how we use overtime across the service, looking at how we can also maximise where we are doing work and invoicing for that work, making sure that we've got good effective processes in and around that. Also putting in some infrastructure around purchasing, and a more efficient and effective way of looking at purchasing nationally rather than locally, which again would in itself bring savings into the organisation. With regards to team engagement, particularly around how we manage change. We have regular meetings with trade union colleagues. We have engaged significantly with them through the consultation period around the implementation of the new operating model, including the tasking unit that we've talked about. So we do meet regularly with trade unions, and we are meeting regularly with our people. We have the next key milestone within the operating model is the introduction of our new management structure. So we have redesigned all management roles across the organisation to make sure they are focused on engagement as one of the key activities, as well as managing our people, supporting our people, making sure that we're maximising the efficiency of our processes, etc. So there's a huge amount of training and development work that will go on over the next, well, starting within the next few months, and then it will continue as an ongoing programme. And that will also provide our managers with more training and tools and techniques around effective staff engagement. The senior management team will also have a programme of going out and visiting staff at sites, making sure that there's visibility of the senior management team and direct conversations with our people around what is happening within the organisation. With regards to tasking, out of hours, we have an on-call system that's in place. So Police Scotland are able to access scene examiners and specialist scientists to attend scenes out of hours as required. With regards to cold cases, there is a prioritisation process that Police Scotland and COPFS will manage in terms of historical cases, and that prioritisation is based on a number of factors that perhaps Police Scotland would be better to answer rather than forensic services. There's an opportunity, I think, in the future for forensic services to look at those cases that we could examine further that have the greatest forensic potential. But at the moment, the prioritisation is based on the cases that Police Scotland and COPFS think are best to progress for a number of reasons and factors.
Okay, no, that's grand. Thanks, Fiona. No, and I think so thanks for that very full answer for, across all fronts. And I think in terms of the cold cases, in terms of the capacity within forensics, you're saying is not an issue in terms of responding to the cold case work.
It isn't, but we would obviously like to do more, but we have to balance that in and amongst the ongoing casework that we do. But there are a number of cold cases which we're engaged with, and we'll undertake the activity that's required to support Police Scotland colleagues in those investigations.
Grand, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Great. Do we have any other questions on this item for Fiona? I've just got a couple myself on the tasking. Looks like a very successful project. Will we have an evaluation to show us that it's a successful project at some point?
Yes, Chair, we will do a post-implementation review. We are also capturing data around the benefits realisation. So we will report that back through a benefits realisation tracker. Appreciating there's still a bit more work for us to do to get the benefits tracker reported through to members, but you absolutely will see that. And we have some really good data being captured for comparison against the baseline, and we're already starting to see those improvements. So yes, we will provide a report on the outcomes of the post-implementation review, lessons learned, and also the benefits realisation.
Lessons learned was the next question I was going to ask. So yes, okay, so that's closed off with that. So great. Okay, any other questions from board members on this? Super. I'm going to then move us on to the next item, which is, if you bear with me, Forensic Service Performance Report. And if you just let me consult my notes, I think that's you again, Fiona.
It is. So I'll just do a few introductory comments, and then I'll direct your attention to a few aspects of the performance report, and then I'll happily take any questions. At the outset, though, and in relation to your question at the action register, Fiona, this is the last version of this performance report that members will see. We have a number of open actions. I think there are 3 to 4 actions on the action register in relation to the performance report. So we are developing a new report in line with the new performance framework. and it will be a lot easier to understand. The information will be a lot more pertinent. There will be more trending information, and there will also be the intention to introduce more forecasting information into the report moving forward, which I know is absent from the data that we have at the moment. And I will talk about demand forecasting further when I present the strategic workforce plan later on the agenda. Within the performance report itself, I've already touched on the tasking unit and also the DNA centralisation project. The focus within forensic services for the previous quarter has been on reducing the age of cases within the caseload, and we have made substantial progress during Q4, with the exception of a few areas that I will come on to talk about within the more detailed charts in the report. This does, though, really put forensic services in a strong performance position as we move into making changes associated with the implementation of the new operating model. And that is a point I really wanted to emphasise. When we talk about the performance in the report, we have made substantial progress over the previous 12 months, and it really does set us up quite well to move into a period of change within the organisation and how we manage the risks associated with any disruption that will happen through that change period. The new post-mortem toxicology service in Junction 24 in Govan continues to work closely with the Crown Office to complete cases to agreed timescales. There is performance information within the report around post-mortem toxicology, and I will touch on that as I go through the report in a moment. With regards to absence rates, they are lower than last year, and we have seen a decrease from Q3 to Q4. There is a slight increase around psychological related absence, which we are obviously doing work on within the organisation, both in terms of managing support for staff that are currently off with psychological related absence, but also in terms of more proactive support for people to prevent those absences from occurring. We do have the new performance framework within the agenda of the meeting today, and this will include then a refresh of the key performance indicators, and those will be incorporated again into future reports. So I note your question, Fiona, around how members will be assured that the new performance report is going to address the feedback from members. So I will commit that we will provide an interim update to members before the next committee meeting, so you can see how the report's developing and have an opportunity to comment and request any further information, so that we can get that report as fit for members' purpose as possible for the next meeting, which will be our Q1 performance report for this financial year. Moving into the charts, I'll take you to page 4 of my report, which is section 3.1. And I wanted to dwell a wee bit on the chart here, which shows the open cases, so the caseload within forensic services across the different parts of the organisation. So you can see the first 2 bars relate to biology, then we move into areas within physical sciences. So looking at biology, really what we're seeing here is a fairly static picture year on year when we compare this year with last year with regards to the number of cases that we have open, which is the bar, and also the age of those cases, which is sitting at the moment an average of 1.8 months is the age of the cases in the caseload within biology, and 0.8 months for biology volume crime unit, which is the more straightforward cases that are looking for a sample to provide a DNA profile that can be searched against the Scottish DNA database. Across the areas of chemistry, drugs, firearms and fingerprints, we see a halving of the cases in progress in comparison with the previous financial year, and also a significant reduction in the timeliness, not the age of the cases that are sitting in that caseload. So really it is a very positive position. So we've seen a reduction in the age of the caseload by at least a half in all of those areas when in comparison with the previous year. Across imaging and mark enhancement, slightly less of an improvement, but still a third improvement in the age of the cases in those areas in comparison with the same time last year. I won't talk about toxicology, which is the column at the far right of this chart at this point. I'll come on and talk to that in some of the more detailed information. So you can see from that the organisation has made substantial progress in addressing the speed at which we can provide work across a whole range of areas, and that is really what is setting us up, I think, to allow the organisational change to happen and then further improvement to be derived as a result of changing ways of working. If I take you to section 3.4, which is on page 7. Again, down the left-hand side, you'll see the different lines on these charts which stretch across onto the following page. Look at, again, those same different areas of forensic services. And then on the left-hand side, we have the demand, and on the right-hand side, we have the output from each of those different areas. The final charts that we have at the far right show the 3-year demand trend across each of the different areas of forensic services. So we can see we have growing demand within biology. And again, we'll touch on this in the strategic workforce plan in terms of the need for us to get better data, I think, in and around what's causing this and whether this is due to persist. Within mark enhancement, we are seeing a significant reduction, and that's directly as a result of improved triaging of cases through the Joint National Forensic Gateway and within the organisation to make sure the activities that we undertake on cases are appropriate, and that's helping us to derive best value in the examinations that we undertake. If I can take you to the page 8 and the last set of demand and output charts in this part of the report, you can see drugs. So within drugs, we've seen a significant reduction in the demand for drugs analysis. And again, as part of the demand work that we need to do, we need to understand if that reduction in drugs analysis is going to continue over time, because that then will allow us to look at resourcing across the organisation to make sure we're fit for the future. Moving into section 3.5 of the report on page 9, you can see in these different tables, again for the different areas of forensic services, the demand over the previous quarter. And then the line that you can see is the capacity within each of those areas of the organisation. So broadly speaking, this shows that the only real significant area of concern right now is toxicology. What I would highlight is biology is an area that is perhaps closer than I would like it to be, and therefore that's an area we need to focus on growing our capacity to be able to sustain those levels of demand which we know are increasing over time. Moving into page 10, we have the criminal toxicology update. So you'll see that slightly different language than we will have used previously, and that's we need to be inclusive given that we now have the post-mortem toxicology. So we now have the 2 different parts of toxicology in forensic services, criminal and post-mortem. So at 3.6.1, we have the timeliness of the section 5A, section 4, the outsourced drug driving cases, and then the combined total. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but I would suggest that perhaps we hold that until we have the drugs driving update within Alistair's later report. At 3.6.2, we have the profile of outsourcing that's being undertaken for the Section 5A and Section 4 drug driving cases, and that has continued into April and will continue this financial year. And in the future report, you will see the outsourcing plan for this financial year included. At 3.6.4, which is on page 13 of the report, you'll see the first performance information that relates to post-mortem toxicology. So this unit is still going through the implementation phase. So at the steady state in terms of meeting the contractual timescales will happen in July So at the moment, we've got an increase in caseload, which will then reduce quite rapidly as all of the different methodologies and tests validations are concluded. We do have the vast majority of that work that's relevant in the majority of cases completed. So again, I'm happy to take any questions on that, but that data will build and develop, and we'll report on that again in the next committee meeting. Then I'm going to take you to page 18 at 3.8.2, which talks about the scene examination performance. There is some trending information on the previous page, but the performance against the KPI that we have of attendance of scenes within, or 90% of scenes within 24 hours, you can see that with the exception of the violent and sexual crime, where we're meeting that key performance indicator, the broader range of crime types, the performance is tracking at 82%. And then you can see beneath that it's 82% in the east, 85% in the north, and 81% in the west. So there has been a 7% increase in scenes attended from Q3 to Q4, and that is an 8% increase over the same period last year. However, overall, we are still seeing a reduction in scene examination requests and attendances in comparison with a number of years ago. There has been good cross-area working. That was running at 40% of scenes attended from out with the local division. With the advent of the new tasking unit, this will be one of the metrics which we'll be reporting on moving forward in terms of the benefits that we're seeing through having that model of national deployment rather than local management of scene requests. At 3.9, we have the quality management system and accreditation update. I've touched on a number of areas of accreditation activity. All of the UCAS evidence, which was as a result of the October-November usual surveillance visits, has been accepted by UCAS, and we are expecting formal communication of maintenance of accreditation any day now. We have had 2 complaints within Q4 and 12 instances of positive feedback. I've touched on the absence data in my opening remarks, so I'll pause at that point, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that. I'm going to maybe kick off with 1 or 2 myself, if that's okay, and then I'll bring other board members in. First, an observation on some of the charts. You seem to have fiscal year of 2020 to 21. So I don't know if the template has, I'm looking at 3.3 at the moment. So I don't know if the template just hasn't been updated. So anyway, that's just mentioning in passing. First thing is 2.9, the post-mortem toxicology. When will the outsourcing for that? When do you anticipate that to finish?
The outsourcing will continue until we achieve steady state, just in terms of making sure that priority cases that go into that unit will be completed within the timescales that are required by the Crown. I would anticipate that by the time we get to steady state, which would be July, so within the next 2 to 3 months, that would be when outsourcing would no longer be required.
Okay. Next question I've got is item on page 9, which is, bear with me, 3.5, lab demand against capacity. I'm looking at the bar charts for imaging, and then the previous page, the trending graph, which seems to be a very steep upward curve. Do we need to be concerned about that? Because it does seem to have met capacity and then some in March, and there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of wriggle room in previous months.
No, I don't think we do need to be concerned about that. The reason that we're seeing that trend is because we introduced a new way of recording imaging requests into our evidence management system. Therefore, we have an absence of data, which is showing an increase in the trend, but that's only because the data was absent. Actually, the demand around imaging is pretty stable. That we do have a few posts that are being recruited within imaging, which will become our visual evidence capability capability in our new operating model. So there is capacity that will increase in that area, but it's not an area of concern.
Okay, thanks. 3.6.2, I know we're going to discuss outsourcing and the forensic toxicology at the next agenda item, but I've just spotted that these seem to be very neat blocks of 300s and 400s that the samples are going in. How is that the case? I thought all samples were going in, all new samples up to a point were going in. So if you've got 352 samples, for example, all of them would have been outsourced. So how is that in such neat blocks each month? Are they being batched or?
Yes. So
Right.
the samples for outsourcing are batched, and those batches then go on the courier run from forensic services to the outsourced provider. So we will wait for the batch to fill. So that,
Right.
yes, there is some delay as a result of that,
Right.
and then we will outsource. So we also have to have agreement between ourselves and the outsourcing providers to when they can take cases and how many they can take, so that we've got that really strong link and a good process then around them being then ready to receive and batch the samples up within their own processes.
And how often are those batches sent in? So how long is the maximum delay likely to be?
Alistair, can I ask you to come in on that one?
Certainly, thanks. Thanks for the question, Chair. So we tend to send the batches monthly,
Right.
although if required, they could be done more frequently.
Okay, Grant, thanks for that. And I'm going to maybe invite other board members to come in at this stage. So I've got Caroline Stewart first, then Jane, and then Fiona McQueen.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Fiona, again for a really fulsome update. I take your remarks about the sort of new format of the document. I think that's a great initiative, and I'm going to kind of encourage a kind of balanced scorecard approach to that, because there's actually some great information in this performance report, but it kind of gets lost in amongst the noise. And I think what's going to be really important is to really get a sense of this business in terms of each area. What's the kind of capacity we have for the year? Where are we in terms of demand for that? You know, how many are in the pipe, if you like? How many have we done this month? And where are we? And a kind of age report, so that we can actually on one page have a kind of ready reckoner, kind of red status where we're ragging things if things are in danger of overblowing. And that enables everybody, ourselves, partners, and everything, to see the state of this business, because especially in the budgetary environment we're in, we have capacity to do so much, and then we have the facility to be outsourcing, but that might require more budget if things are going to go right off. But at the moment, we don't have a sort of plan to instantly, a page sort of thing that's a view to say, these are the dangers, this is in control, that's fine. So it's that kind of approach so that we can really kind of drive this business so that our partners really understand as well. Because there may be a point that we're saying, well, that's it, we've kind of used up. We used up the annual budget for this, and unless there's some more money coming forthwith, that's kind of it. So I think that would be very helpful, but just a page, because I think your good information gets a bit lost in this. But I also want to say well done on the whole for actually managing to get on top of a lot of that caseload. It's very pleasing to see that actually that sort of demand versus output is sort of starting to narrow the gap. Obviously, there's areas of tension within, pressure. And I suppose that brings me to the last question, is how transferable are people? So you were saying there's been a less demand on, say, drugs testing, drugs testing. Are these people are they skilled to go into another section? How transferable are people? Can we kind of lift up and lift down, move people around, or is it very much skilled for the job? I'm just not very sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. So just answering your last question first, and then I'll provide a few comments about the performance report. It's difficult at the moment with the organisation structured the way it is to easily flex people between different units within forensic services, and that's for the primary reason that we're transitioning to our new operating model. So there are generic activities that are done within biology, chemistry, drugs, that could be done by the same person, but at the moment they're done within their own functional areas. So the new operating model cuts the organisation differently. So actually we have search and recovery So that's all about opening the package once and then doing all of the different tests and then closing the package. Whereas at the moment we have a package that may be open 2 or 3 times if there are 2 or 3 different areas of forensic services that need to do it. So there absolutely are transferable skills between different areas. And what we will have in the new operating model is roles designed to facilitate that. So we don't have to go through, you know, a consultation or quite long, detailed discussions to try to flex resource across different parts of the organisation. So that's the fundamental principle of the new operating model. There are absolutely specialist areas of forensic science where you can't do that, and you probably never will. Some of our most experienced toxicologists would fall into that category, which is why it's so difficult to grow toxicology capacity, because you can't just flex the most difficult work, if you like. That's a specialist area. So we're looking at these general areas and trying to be more efficient at that. I take your point completely with regards to the performance report, and I think we do need to tell that story in a really simple, clear way, using RAG status so that it's very clear where the issues are within the organisation and what we're doing about that to members. So again, I'm be very keen to share with you the thinking and that sort of draft report so that we can get your feedback as to whether that's hitting the mark for the performance report for this financial year onwards.
I think that would be very welcome indeed, because I think if we have that sort of one pager, it enables, you know, from that sort of governance and scrutiny, and also to let partners know where are we on track or not. And also it enables us then to look at that, and if we can enrich that almost with some of the cost to serve kind of models, and that cost to serve in the outsourced model, it kind of gives us a richer picture, and that then will feed into your strategic workforce plan. So the whole thing's a kind of symbiotic thing about really grabbing this business and having that full picture, so you can be really in control of everything that's happening around you. Because you're right, so if everyone's not fully flexible, then we need to understand that. It's really important to understand, because then how much flex is there in the capacity we have? And if there's not enough, then we need to think about that in terms of demand that's coming down the pipe. So I think that's all very welcome, and I think that will give us much more assurance. So, and any help you need with that, very welcome to assist. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Caroline. The next person I've got on the list is Jane Ryder. Morning,
Thank
Jane.
you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I completely agree with what Caroline said about the need to see the big picture, the need to be able to see the wood for the trees, but and the issues around the business model. So I'm going to go to completely the other end of the spectrum, if I may, and look at page 19 and complaints and feedback, because I think I heard you say, Fiona, that there had been 2 complaints during this period, but what we have here, it says during this reporting period, so it may be a question of timing, none were reportable to the SPA Complaints and Conduct Committee, with all relating to service delivery to the Crown or Police Scotland. I don't quite understand that statement, but if there have been 2 complaints, albeit perhaps they were not reportable to the Complaints and Conduct Committee, can you just give us a flavour of what they are? And, you know, are there any comparable figures? Is there any trend, and what's been done with them?
Thank you, Jane. I'll ask Craig to come in with some of the specifics around the complaints, but just prior to that, we are required to report complaints from members of the public to the SPA Complaints and Conduct Committee. Complaints that don't meet the criteria that are set out are managed through the Forensic Services Management System, and we've got detailed and robust processes in place to manage all types of non-conforming work, including complaints and negative feedback, as well as recommendations for improvement. So we have systems in place, and you can see the data for the whole financial year there in terms of the complaints that we have had come into the organisation, received, closed, and also the positive feedback during this period. So that is, broadly speaking, the processes that we have. But Craig, could you perhaps talk about the 2 complaints in relation to Q4?
I wonder, before Craig does that very kindly, just I'm sorry if I'm being remarkably stupid, but the statement here says during this reporting period, none, So no complaints were reportable to the Complaints and Conduct Committee, which may well be with all relating to service delivery to I don't quite understand the grammar of that.
Okay, perhaps I could ask Craig to cover that and to
That'd be
give a bit
great.
of detail
Thank
about
you.
the complaints. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for bringing in this. The complaints that were received in this quarter were relating to available resource. They were relating to Police Scotland requesting assistance for scene examination activity, and there was delays in getting scene examiners available to attend. So they were feedback on the service that we were providing to Police Scotland. As per the terms of feeding back to the SPA Complaints Conduct Committee, we report via the SPA colleagues any complaints or negative feedback that are from the public. If the report is clumsy in its wording, I'm happy to look at that and change that and provide more information, but it was internal on service delivery for those two complaints.
Thank you. That clarifies that. There were only two complaints, you said,
Yes.
but were they both relating then to scene
They were.
examination? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And they were resolved. What
Yes.
happened with those?
Yes, they've been resolved. There's been discussions, and there was particular reasons for shortage of staff and absence in particular areas at particular times. One of which there was a bit of a communication issue between Police Scotland and ourselves, which added to that delay. But with the tasking unit and the improvements in that area, that's all going to make a huge difference to that area of question examination.
So the reassurance we're looking for, of course, is lessons learned, and that won't happen again, which is what we need to keep an eye on.
With any complaint within the management system, we do an effectiveness check. Later on, we specify a period between 3 and 6 months to actually establish whether the action that has been taken has been effective in this case, to make sure that it doesn't recur.
But in this case, you're saying there are only two
Yes.
during the period. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
And just, can I ask, was there any detrimental impact on the Justice Service or the outcomes of that?
I couldn't say off the top of my head what the impact was in the case. I would need to take that back and investigate that further.
Okay, thanks. Fiona McQueen.
So just following on from that dialogue, and apologies if I should know, but I don't. How would we normally have that level of scrutiny on complaints, in particular with the outcome of poor standard of service and the assurance that we're making improvement? Do we normally get formal complaint reports to this committee?
No, Fiona, we don't ordinarily report the full detail of the complaints which we get into forensic services. I mean, that they are relatively few in the context of the volume of the work that we're undertaking. It's something that we could produce more information if members are interested to see more information in relation to complaints that are received, that are not complaints made by members of the public, which clearly the Complaints and Conduct Committee would have full visibility of.
I don't know. I'm just wondering about, and it's maybe something we need to take away and reflect on in terms of the governance of the total governance. It intuitively feels to me as though we perhaps should get a bit more routine information, but
possibly an annual report in it or something like that.
Maybe helpful for thoughts. The other aspect is back to your dialogue with Caroline, Fiona, in terms of capacity. Do you have a target for the age of cases? So I understand that there's a variation in terms of the age of cases, but I would be interested to know what would be an ideal world of closure of cases, and in particular their impact on the justice system or not, given the age of the cases we have just now.
We have an output target. It's buried in the strategic workforce plan in terms of this financial year. It's at the final page of the strategic workforce plan. That's been a significant amount of work in developing that. So with the budget that Forensic Services has for this financial year, we have an output target for each area of Forensic Services, which we will report on in the new performance report. That is what we are able to deliver with the budget that we have and the activity that's going on in Forensic Services. We have a 5% stretch target applied to that as well, in terms of making sure that we're focused on efficiency and the effectiveness of the work that we do. With regards to timeliness, we have full timeliness targets associated with work instructed through the Crown Office. With regards to police investigative work, targets for the most serious of cases where there's a forensic strategy meeting are determined, and they're usually staged based on the forensic strategy and the requirements for different packages of the forensic science work to be delivered within different timeframes. So those will have very case-specific targets. The area that's really challenging for us is what falls in between those categories. So this is generally the acquisitive crime, police investigative, local policing cases. And at the moment, this is the work that, generally speaking, sits at the end of the priority list. So given the challenges that we have had with capacity and demand over previous years, although we are coming out of that now, it has been a matter of getting to those cases when they can. And as a result of that, the timescales have been quite long. The new operating model is all about changing that prioritisation, and actually undetected cases should be at the top of the priority list, just beneath those high-profile investigations. So that will come. It's going to take a bit longer because we need to deliver the efficiencies to self-invest in the new operating model. But we are working on having targets internally around timeliness. That's still a little bit more work to do on that, but again, I would hope that we'll be able to report on the timeliness part of that in the next performance report again.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Fiona, because I'm interested in this. I fully accept that we need to work within the resources we have, but I'm also, and I think what you're saying about the case specific times that are agreed are helpful, and I think keep us safe in terms of making sure that the highest priority gets the resources and the outcomes that were needed. And I look forward then to that further discussion about, in an ideal world, what time should we have versus what we have, and on balance, the appropriateness of that.
I think we'll get some interesting insights from the work of the value steering group and the research that's going to be undertaken in that area, because actually part of the question around how quickly is the forensic science required impacts on then the value that we get from that. So I think particularly around the research that's going to look at acquisitive crime, how does the speed of the provision of the forensic result matter? How much does it matter in terms of then the value of the outcome? I think in acquisitive crime, the research and the data that is already out there suggests that the faster it's done, the more likely there is to be an outcome. So I absolutely would want us to look at that, and I think that the research that the Leverhulme Institute at the University of Dundee are going to do alongside Forensic Services and colleagues in Police Scotland and the Crown is going to really help us to be able to answer some of those questions.
Grand, look forward to that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much for all of these questions. Any other questions from board members on this agenda item? Okay, if we can note this and then move on to the next item, which is the update on drug driving, which I believe is Alistair.
Thanks very much, Gail. Thank you. So I'll take the paper as read, but I'll draw out some pertinent points just to highlight, if that's okay. The introduction of new offence in Scotland on October 2019 set specific drug driving limits for 17 specified drugs. Change was part of the Scottish Government's programme for government in 1920. Forensic Services support the delivery of the drug blood limit testing requirement for the Act, prompted by a positive roadside test, and that process is accredited to the recognised laboratory standard ISO 17025 by UCAS, the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. Demand has consistently been more than twice the original estimated level, and the current level of demand for Section 5A analysis is currently about 205 cases per month. I'm pleased to say that the internal caseload has reduced significantly in recent times as a result of the increased level of outsourcing funded by the Scottish Government in particular. Staff within the toxicology team have been working at full capacity since the introduction of legislation. We've put measures in place to monitor their well-being, but there were significant concerns at the continued high demands being placed on them. However, as a result of the actions taken, these high demands are now starting to reduce, which is good. In terms of the number of cases that could not be progressed to prosecution, I'm pleased to say no further cases reached the current statutory 12-month time limit due to delays in laboratory testing from September 2022 to date. Fiona alluded to HMICS publication of the report earlier. That was published on the 25th of April. Scottish Government has agreed to fund up to a further 310,000 for outsourcing for this financial year, which will further help us with the improvement activities, so equipment validation, method development and staff training. We continue to work closely with Police Scotland, the Crown and the Scottish Government to manage and mitigate risks and to develop a sustainable system-wide solution that can meet future demand and mitigate against cases reaching the statutory time limit. Fiona also alluded to a positive UCAS visit to Edinburgh on the 27th of March, which was really good. If I can take you on to the case ageing, which is on page 6. So the top left-hand graph that relates to Section 5A testing, and you can see the decline in ageing of cases there down to the March level of 7 months. More recent figure shows that it's 6.1, so again that level of improvement is continuing. In terms of the Section 4 samples, a similar trend coming down to 8.4, and there's further improvement there as well. In terms of outsourcing, the figure there, which is the third from the left, is 7.6 months, which is slightly higher than we would like. And when you combine all the age in totals, that gives us the graph at the top right-hand side there. Our in-house output through Q1 and Q2 is expected to be relatively low as staff are abstracted for equipment validation, method development and training, as I've alluded to earlier. The number and subsequently reported age of completed outsourced cases is tracking slightly behind plan following relatively unforeseen capacity issues with the contracted supplier. A recovery plan is in place and we're in dialogue with the provider regarding that. The next graph on page 7 gives the profile of the outsourced cases, and as Fiona has said, that is continuing into this year, and we will continue to use the available contract as aggressively as we can. In terms of drug driving in-house analysis, so the decline in the number of cases that are ongoing is shown there both for Section 5A and for Section 4. The graph in the right shows the number of open cases 42 weeks or more from incident. And I'm pleased to say that the volumes of internal casework is reducing, as we can see there. And the current position is that there's one case within the 10 weeks of statutory time limit, and that is being prioritised and progressed. In terms of, let's see, I mentioned the no cases. And there was some lower output than anticipated there. There was less overtime worked. There was some sickness in there, some annual leave, and the development plan activities. So that's the variety of reasons that I have alluded to. And I think that probably concludes the brief summary of the drug driving update. But I'm happy to take any questions. Okay,
thanks for that, Alistair. Can I just ask, what is the position now with these historic cases? You said it was hoping to be zero by the end of April. This is now May. Do we have a real-time figure for that?
Yes, Chair, thank you. So the current figure as of last week, in terms of Section 5A cases, we have 25. So if I can put that in perspective, going back to September 21, there was over 1,400. In terms of Section 4s, we currently have 36, and going back a period of time, that was 400 cases. So as you can appreciate, it's very much a dynamic situation. As one case leaves, another one comes in, but that's the most up-to-date position.
Right, well, where I'm coming from is it says all in-house drug driving cases with pre-2023 incident dates are expected to be completed by the end of April 2023. Is that the case? Have they been completed?
No, unfortunately, there are some, a small number of cases which have not been completed yet, and the overall success is determined in part regarding or in relation to the timeliness of submissions. Right, so the numbers are small.
So and those numbers are what?
I can answer that question, Chair.
Yeah, so, if you could.
So with regards to that statement, also sits in the performance report, there are 8 Section 5A cases that are open in relation to cases that are pre-2023, and there are 14 Section 4 cases that are open as well for that period. There are a number of reasons for that. Some of them are internal, some of them relate to delays in submissions. So these are cases that have been received into forensic services a number of months after the sample was taken, as well as a few that are just requiring some final analysis as part of a sequential testing process. So those will be completed. Certainly the Section 5A cases will be completed within the next week. The Section 4 cases often result in a more detailed and complex testing, again, that is done on a sequential basis. So those will take a wee bit longer. But again, it's just the final stragglers. We are looking within the Operation Hitch Improvement Group still at the end-to-end process, and we will be reporting in the next meeting the time taken from incident to submission date, as well as then submission date to completion of the forensic report. And as Alistair's noted in his report, the target timeliness within the criminal toxicology unit is now 95% of Section 5A cases to be completed within 3 months, which allows us to future-proof the change or potential change within the statutory time limit as a result of the lapse of the COVID legislation.
Okay, thanks for that. And the next question I've got is, in order to address the backlog, cases that have come in have been outsourced, all new cases. At what point do you start to take new cases in-house, or has that started already?
So some new cases are being dealt with in-house. We're outsourcing effectively as many as we can. And that period, that process of outsourcing will continue for a considerable period of time, I would expect, in order to allow us to grow the capacity internally.
Right. Okay. And do we have a target for how many in-house samples are going to be analysed, or an idea of what the capacity is at the moment and likely to be?
Yes, so the intention through the Tox development plan is that our in-house capacity will reach 270 cases per month in due course, once the development activities have been completed.
Can I add to that, Chair,
Yes, please.
to give a little bit more information? So we have a 12-month forward view of the internal output that's required from the criminal toxicology unit alongside the expected level of demand for cases. And then the gap between those two is the level of outsourcing which we seek to achieve through that period. And that has been calculated, and that is what has founded the business case and the request to Scottish Government of funding of the 310,000 for outsourcing this financial year. So that bridges the gap between the internal capacity, which will fluctuate through the financial year, and the level of demand that Police Scotland have indicated for this year. So we will see, as Alistair has said, the internal output within the unit will be quite low within the first 2 quarters of the year, and that's to allow that method development and the training to happen of new staff within the unit, and also multi-skilling of existing staff. Then we have a chart, I think this has been presented previously, that shows the capacity growing over that period, and then by the end of the financial year getting to that 270 figure that Alistair says. And that's what we get for this period, is by the end of the financial year we should have sufficient in-house capacity to be able to service current levels of demand, and then it's the long-term sustainable model which is the next part of that, then, in terms of how do we deal with the changes in demand that Police Scotland want and need in order to make the legislation as effective as possible.
Yes, you're quite right. You have presented that before, and it was a clumsy question by me, but it's still re-emphasising it doesn't hurt.
Not at all. Not at all.
I've got a question regarding paragraph 2.13, which makes reference to the recruitment activity for temporary analysts and senior forensic scientists. Can you maybe advise us on the timelines for these staff starting and then getting up to full speed?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the temporary posts, recruited as temporary originally in light of the budget challenges, 3 of the 4 members of staff were recruited, and the 4th one unfortunately was rejected by the preferred applicant. So with the conversion to permanent members of staff, there are some internal processes that we need to go through in order to do that. So we're going through that at the moment with our colleagues from P&D, and as part of the development plan, there are timescales for training of new staff over a period of 2 months or so to develop their basic laboratory skills and aspects of the new role, and that will help with the overall development of the capability and the capacity. So we've just got to get over that final hurdle of making the posts permanent for the individuals in terms of contracts, and then we'll be off and running, but we're nearly there.
And the last question I've got for the time being is paragraph 2.20, which is regarding the UCAS visit to the toxicology team. Now it says it was concluded successfully, but subject to necessary submissions of evidence regarding clearance of findings. Can you give me an indication of what sort of evidence was required, and has this now been submitted?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the evidence that was submitted was additional detail in relation to the position within toxicology. For example, the development plan. And typically what happens in terms of the assessment visit is that the submissions of the evidence are done in a written format, and that is submitted to the assessment team, who review that evidence and then either clear the findings at that point or ask for additional evidence.
Grand, thanks for that. Okay, board members, Caroline, you first, then Jane, and then Fiona McQueen.
Thanks, Chair, and you covered a couple of mine, so I'll keep mine very brief. And it was really just thanks for the report, Alistair. And I guess it was really around that sort of demand management and also abstraction management, because you said some people have been away doing training courses, etc., which is absolutely vital for CPD, for professionals. But I'm just wondering, in terms of managing a business with such high demand, how do we plan for that? Do we then see for that month that they're going to be out, we do more outsourcing, or however? I'm just wondering how you kind of plan that in the business, because that kind of workforce planning is vital in terms of an area that's got such high demand. Thanks.
Thanks very much for the question, Caroline. Yes, very much so. So looking at the areas of highest abstraction and trying to align that with the maximum level of outsourcing. So we're in regular dialogue with our outsource partner. And the timescales for the development plan have been clearly documented. So we're just working through that. We've got the operations manager, capability team manager working on this on an ongoing basis. So we're very much looking forward to seeing that that capacity grow. But yes, in terms of management, been well managed.
Can I just add to that again? So Caroline, as part of the development plan activity, the abstraction in relation to training. So this is less about continuing professional development training and more about building different scientific skills within the process. So each of the different aspects of training has been aligned following a gap analysis for each member of staff to make sure that we're targeting the right activities according to the levels of demand that we expect of the different types of toxicology analysis. So the abstractions related to that are factored into the improvement plan. So again, it's the combination of the internal output, the improvement activity, the outsourcing, and then the confirmation that that meets the level of demand that we expect from Police Scotland and that we have discussed with Police Scotland as part of the Operation Hitch Improvement Group. We have developed an MOU specifically in relation to drugs driving, which sets out the level of demand, certainly for this financial year, and also details then how the outsourcing process, roles and responsibilities, etc., will work. And if there is an increase in demand, then some of the different mechanisms and discussions that will happen as a result of that.
That's very welcome. That's very welcome. It's just part of that bigger piece. You know, if we do have to take people out for skills training, and I think that your explanation there is just, it's hugely helpful actually. But I think it's just how do we manage that demand in the absence, you know, because things like that happen, and it's just how do we kind of get over that in an area of such high demand. So thanks for that. Very good explanation. Thank you.
Alistair, were you wanted to come in at this point?
Thank you. Just to add a point that was raised earlier in terms of the overall capacity, in terms of the recruitment decisions and various demands within the teams, there may be options to move some staff or move the posts around. There are some similarities between some of the teams and less so for others. So we do have that option as well. We're exploring that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. That's very welcome. Thank you.
Jane Ryder.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Fiona Douglas touched on my very question in her final comments, because we've talked a lot about managing capacity, but what I was interested to just clarify were the assumptions about expected demand. And I think I want to just clarify and pull out from what you said that this is not simply internal assumptions. This is very much informed, indeed query to some extent framed by Police Scotland, because you have to draw on the Police Scotland informed expectation of demand. And I think that's quite important, that it's not a purely internal one. So can you just confirm that? And the other was, again, a point of clarification, and I apologise, I should know this, but I think it relates to the same thing. Page 9, it's talking about at the end of Q4, only 2 active drug driving cases were within the 10-week window of statutory time limit. Remind me where that 10 weeks derives from and what are the implications of that?
Thanks very much, Jane. Yes, to answer your first question regarding demand, yes, we work very closely with colleagues in Police Scotland, and the demand forecast is based on the best available information. We did expect to see a bit of an increase in demand coming through around the tail end of last year, and we did indeed see that. So the demand forecast has not solely been created by ourselves, but in partnership with our colleagues in Police Scotland. And the second point was in relation to, sorry, page 9.
There's a reference to the 10-week window of statutory time limit, and just sort of tease out some of that, where that comes from and what are the implications of that.
Okay, so the 10-week window was essentially working back from the timescales that are required from our partners to be able to process cases and still meet the statutory time limit. So we are reducing further beyond that. I think once that remaining case disappears from that window, the timescales will continue to fall, and the 10-week window will be largely irrelevant at that point. But it's working back from that timescale for a margin of error, if I can describe it like that.
And so, what is your, having resolved that? Do we have an ideal window timescale that, if we're in smooth running, is it 12 weeks, 15 weeks, 20 weeks? I doubt it's as much as 20 weeks. What's smooth running? Do you have a figure for that yet?
So in terms of the reporting the cases, and I'll specifically refer to 5As at the moment, the target that we're aiming for is 3 months. Okay. So it's with the intention of anticipating the return from the 12-month statutory time limit to 6 months. So we are approaching that with that firmly in mind. So in terms of 5As, as I've said, the reporting time that we're looking at is 3 months. So it'll be sufficiently far away from the statutory time limit.
And again, that's not just set by us, is that sets a figure that is agreed with the police in particular, and the Crown Office where it's relevant?
Yes, again, as part of the tripartite arrangement, discussions have been ongoing about the Memorandum of Understanding for drug driving, and the associated timescales have been discussed with the partners, and they are being taken forward. So yes, absolutely.
Fiona, Douglas, you wanted to come in at this point.
Yes, please. So Jane, in the MOU that's specifically for drug driving, it sets out the end-to-end process, and it's based upon the statutory time limit reducing back to 6 months. So that 6 months basically is from incident date to the start of proceedings. That needs to happen within that statutory time frame. So at the moment, if it's within 10 weeks of that statutory time limit, it requires to be flagged to Police Scotland. Police Scotland then report quickly to the Crown, and the Crown initiate proceedings quickly. So it's those extraordinary measures which we've been talking about and have been in place for some considerable time as we've been managing the backlog of work. The new MOU, though, sets out those clear timeliness expectations for each stage of the process. So within 6 months, there's 2 weeks for Police Scotland in terms of the incident, the taking of the sample, and then getting that to the laboratory. Then the target within the laboratory will be 95% from receipt of the sample in the laboratory through to provision of a report. Then there's a time frame for Police Scotland to take our report and to provide all of the additional information to report that to the Crown. And then there's 1.5 to 2 months then for the Crown to initiate proceedings in the case. So what we will have, again, through the op-pitch improvement group is an ability to look at the end-to-end process and measure our compliance at those different milestones within it, so that we can continue to drive improvement.
Okay. Alistair, and then I'm going to go to Fiona McQueen.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I guess just to extend that discussion there, so similar discussions have been had with our outsourced partner in relation to the possible reduction of the statutory timescale time limit to 6 months later in the year. So the outsourced partner is very aware of these limitations as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that is something that the HMICS report, well, which must have been cited of all of this, but was anticipating, requiring us to anticipate that potential reduction of time limit.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've had reports on this. Well, we have had reports on this, I'm sure, to the committee in the past. So, but it's important we get that out there again, I think. So, Fiona McQueen, and then I'll move the business on.
Chair, thanks very much indeed. The passage of that dialogue between the team and Jane has largely answered my questions. So Fiona, you talked about 95% of specimens will be processed from receipt until publication of report. What are your assumptions? Are your assumptions that they're come in and be processed right away, or are you making assumptions that actually there will be a backlog?
No, I'm not making assumptions there'll be a backlog, because there shouldn't be, because we've cleared the work out of the laboratory through the outsourcing activity that we completed at the end of last financial year. So we're in a strong position now, with a very low caseload within the unit, that we will from now, in fact from the start of this financial year, have that target in place for the unit. So the work should start as soon as it's received, and then the analysis is batched appropriately through the process, and then gradually as the improvement activity kicks in through the financial year, that process will become more and more efficient.
Okay, grand. Look forward to that. And of course, there is going to be, I'm making the bold assumption that actually there'll be an increased number of cases over the 205 per month, but we've got systems and processes set up that will deal with that dialogue and arrangements.
Yeah, so we will report on our expectations around the internal casework over the period, which will be quite low in the first 2 quarters, and then will gradually increase to the 270 per month, which we would expect to have by the end of the financial year, start of next year, which again meets the current levels of demand from Police Scotland, but not beyond that.
Okay, that's grand. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thanks very much, and thanks, Alistair, for leading on this. Okay, can we note this, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is, excuse me 1 second, Forensic Service Performance Framework, and we've got Vicky Morton who's presenting on that. So welcome, Vicky, over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair. In terms of, just to introduce this item into the meeting, the covering paper sets out some initial information on the purpose of the performance framework. So essentially it's a tool designed to ensure our approach to managing performance is really outcome focused, is flexible and has a forward-thinking approach where new and emerging issues are considered. So we've essentially just translated our strategic outcomes as set out in our forensic strategy, which was approved in September 2021, and aligned that obviously with, there is that alignment with the Scottish Government's justice outcomes, strategic aims of Police Scotland, COPFS and PERC, etc. The covering paper also outlines in section 2 the approach that we've taken in terms of this development. So first of all, I'd just like to express my thanks to the SPA strategy and performance team who have assisted in the development of this piece of work throughout the whole process, and that's involved workshop type approach in terms of getting feedback internally from forensic services. We've had the session with yourselves and SPA Corporate in January 2023, along with other SPA board members, which was very useful in that discussion there. We have also presented for discussion at a recent Forensic Performance Improvement Group, or FPIG, and taken back feedback there. So I think the important thing to note just before we talk through briefly the document itself is that just to recognise that it actually provides a more high-level strategic overview of performance and the importance of the internal supporting documents, the importance of that alignment with what we've been talking about earlier in terms of our performance reporting, the strategic workforce plan, etc. So as Fiona's already mentioned, the performance framework will help shape our performance report as we go forward. So if I just refer now to the performance framework document itself, the introduction essentially just sets out our commitment to equality, diversity, inclusion, with the focus on mainstreaming that within our ways of working. It shows the strategic alignment as the key approach here, and our approach to performance management in terms of the importance, as I've mentioned, around the strategic workforce plan, which will sit alongside this document, and the performance reporting itself. So just then taking through to the the main body, if you like, of the document, so reference from page 11 onwards, what you'll see here is it's been set up around each strategic outcome. So that is outlined in more detail within the performance questions posed, the data evidence to be measured, and the type of evidence we're looking to take forward here. And as I say, just to elaborate a little further, that importance of the internal documentation that will be supporting this overall framework. So if we look first of all on page 11, outcome 1, which focuses on our people, that they're supported through a positive working environment, enabling them to provide excellent forensic services. Just a couple of examples of areas where we'll want to focus on around, for example, safety and well-being. So there's a number of health and safety related measures, KPIs here, which will be reported through our internal health and safety management structure and also into the Police Scotland Health and Safety Board. Another example in this area in terms of outcome work is around workforce development, how we support our staff to progress in the organisation, culture and values, and there's aspects and examples of what data and evidence we want to take forward in relation to that. Outcome 2 is on page 15, which looks at the sustainability, the adaptability of our organisation being prepared for future challenges. And again, this section focuses on things like building our services for the future, which again very much links in with our strategic workforce planning, capacity demand management, forecasting, etc. It also covers aspects around new innovations and technologies. So to what extent are we making the right decisions around where our technology can and should go in the future, aligned with the needs and requirements of the criminal justice system. It's very much there around measures around as we introduce new technologies, that benefits realisation, which again has been another topic we've discussed this morning. Outcome 3, which starts on page 18, then covers about us having high quality ethical services, and we're leading in order to advance forensic science. So again, the areas and some of the questions posed in terms of our performance framework is around that advancement in forensic science and that value that we see and we demonstrate internationally in terms of the work that we do. Very much aligned with our research, design and innovation kind of area of forensic services, which, as you know, has been a key part of the operating model and has been implemented. Key here is also around customer feedback. So again, this is where the performance around the KPIs, the timeliness, the future demands, the forecasting is really important here as well. And then outcome 4 is around working collaboratively. And again, throughout this morning, we've had examples of where that partnership working in terms of ourselves, Police Scotland, COPFS, but often we are not perhaps measuring effectively through a performance framework and recognising the extent of that collaboration and wider than that in terms of academia, in terms of research opportunities, etc. as well. So that's a brief overview of how we have developed the framework itself and the key areas. There will be supporting documentation that will align internally with this, and again, very much like to give assurance that the performance reporting, which we've talked about earlier, will be a key aspect of development of that piece of work. And finally, I'd like to just pay thanks to obviously the SPA colleagues within strategy and performance who've helped pull this together, and also internally within forensic services. Helen Hayworth had a huge input here, as well as other managers and staff across the organisation. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that, Vicky. Just to be clear, I'm looking at item 2.7 on the covering report, and it says that we don't agree this today. It gets agreed by the SPA authority. So just to note that. I have to say, when I first read it, I was a bit sniffy about it because I wasn't seeing numbers and targets. But actually, this is just the broad framework. So presumably there will be a further report on KPIs, etc., that will actually come up to the board. So we'll get some sense of that, what we want measured and what we want to see at a board level.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's the next phase we have. Obviously, as Fiona has mentioned earlier, the strategic workforce plan has an element of what our outputs are expected to be in this, or we are committing to this financial year. But yes, absolutely. In terms of all the framework there, we'll have those targets. Benchmarking information, we'll report on that. We will clearly align which meeting and what governance approach is required for each of those.
And just again, to emphasise, this is hugely important. It's important anyway because we need to keep tabs on performance. But because we're going through particularly tricky financial waters, we've got to make sure that every penny is getting as much value as possible, and that we're delivering as best as possible on the public investment into the service. So I've got 3 hands up at the moment. So the first is Katharina Casper. Katharina, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Victoria. I just wanted to say I really welcome this. I think this is very, very helpful to see it at this stage, and also to appreciate the consultation process that you've been through in getting to the stage. Just to echo what the Chair has been saying, it is a framework document at this stage, so understand the high level nature of it. But I think, I think it's really good to see that really balanced picture of what performance can look like. So it's almost, to me, it reminds me of a balanced scorecard type approach. So really welcome that, particularly considering that some of the strategic objectives actually do all interlink. So one will impact on the other, etc., etc. So it's all linked. So just a couple of questions, and I appreciate I might have to kind of hold my horses and wait until the further work has been done and presented to us. But if I kind of missed that, apologies. I was wondering, so what is the current thinking around, firstly, the reporting frequency in this framework? So is it an annual, monthly, etc.? Because I think, some of the observations I had that some of the currently proposed types of evidence, you could probably see quite a big change, on a month-to-month basis, whilst others probably take, the time horizon is much longer. So I just was wondering what kind of thinking is on that. And then similarly, I noticed that in the type of evidence column in this particular document, some of them have got qualitative, quantitative metrics, some are saying future measures. So again, apologies if I'm kind of asking for something that hasn't quite yet been fully developed, but in terms of the data that we have, to what degree would you say does the current available data NMI support this framework? And percentage-wise, where do you feel still, more work is required to get us to a stage where we will have that data? You have a really helpful graph, I think it's on page 6, where it kind of shows the evolution of the KPIs. So I was just wondering where in that, evolution of KPIs are we? Apologies, lots of questions there, but yeah, I'm very excited about this.
Thanks, Katarina, and thanks for the questions. If I cover first of all the reporting frequency, I think that really depends on what part of the performance framework we are considering. For example, the health and safety data, and linking into, I suppose, your question around the level of assurance around the information and the data we already have, that's well established, and that has been for a considerable period of time. So that's almost, I would say, business as usual for us in terms of many of the KPIs that are already reported on a quarterly basis within forensic services, and then, as I say, into the forensic service, the Police Scotland Health and Safety Board. There are other areas where I would say there's much more development required, and I think it would be useful to have guidance on what level of reporting to say, for example, this committee. I think a further discussion would be useful, just to understand what would meet your needs in terms of that assurance and scrutiny. Some areas may be quarterly or as per every forensic services committee, such as around the performance data, but other measures such as health and safety and such as some the people metrics may be more appropriate to have on a annual or every 6-month period. So take guidance from that. And in terms of the question around KPI development, in terms of the qualitative and quantitative and benchmarking and where we are now, we do have already quite a significant amount of benchmarking information and almost baseline information on people metrics in terms of more qualitative information. So, for example, surveys that we have participated in over the last number of years. So again, it's we have that baseline data there. We have been benchmarking. I would say the quantitative data is probably more progressed than more of the qualitative, though, overall.
Thanks, Kat.
Thank you very much.
Happy with that, Katharina?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Great. Fiona McQueen.
Thanks, Chair, and you're really great to see this in the position it's in, Vicky, in terms of, you know, when we were out with you at Gartcosh and we were seeing a much earlier, less progressed version of this. So it's great to see. A couple of things. First, for the Chair, I'm just wondering, I noted that this was not for us to approve, it was to go to the authority.
Yeah.
I'm just interested if that's a terms of reference thing, if we're not allowed to. So I'm curious as to why that is the case. And
I'll
then
let Eleanor answer that if she's still in the call, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Yeah, the approval of performance framework is a matter reserved for the board as it currently stands, is my understanding. Colette will tell me if I've got that right. But yes, it's a matter reserved for the board.
Yeah,
Grand.
that's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's grand. And I think you've probably answered in your dialogue with Katharina. I'm interested. So we had the trauma day, and obviously the welfare and well-being of people at work, and that's something that we're going to be progressing and doing more work on. We have, and you know, I've interested in the dialogue about the strategic workforce plan for forensic services, but we have a strategic workforce plan and a people strategy for Police Scotland. We have the HMICS report that is making some suggestions about where the oversight of matters around people should be. So in my head, and I'd be interested if you could help me understand in terms of the P&D Directorate, you know, where have excuse me, they been in the development of the metrics and the data for the well-being piece, and is there something about commonality? Now, I completely accept that Police Scotland and forensic services are, if we ignore the governance of it, but completely separate services and therefore need different approaches. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to be looking at similar measures where we can have similar issues. And clearly, the matter for laboratories and for response police officers are quite different. But you know, psychological safety, joy at work, well-being, I think it would be helpful if we were managing to look at similar metrics across all of our services.
Thanks, Fiona, for those comments and questions there. Yeah, I would like to give you assurance from a people metrics perspective. We work very closely with our P&D colleagues. They are part of our monthly people board, which again is in another paper I'll present later. So they're very much well versed and integrated, and we work very closely with them in terms of metrics, understanding what that looks like, and identifying actions that need to be taken, very much in collaboration. We all the people metrics data is supported through the systems across both Police Scotland and ASPA, so it's the same processes, and we have dashboards that are created and provided to us. We are very much working with our P&D colleagues at the moment to enhance some of the available data that we have, absolutely is at forensic services level, and some of the data we want to kind of drill down a little more in terms of in terms of our own structure. And again, it's important we think ahead of what our new operating model and our new structure is going to look like. So we're cutting the organisation, as Fiona mentioned earlier, just in different ways, rather than functions, but more around capabilities in the future.
Grand, that's great. Thanks very much indeed for that assurance. Look forward to seeing how that develops. Thanks, Chair.
Fiona Douglas, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chair.
Yeah, please.
I think, Fiona, you make a really good point with regards to making sure that we look for areas of synergy between our performance framework and Police Scotland's measures and within the work that they're doing. I think there's perhaps a lack of visibility from our perspective around where that's going. So I think we can close that gap between now and the next committee meeting. Forensic services is very different, as you say, from some of the challenges certainly that Police Scotland colleagues have. We have done a number of surveys. The Your Wellbeing Matters survey is one of those where which we have in common with Police Scotland. But the baseline data that we have for forensic services is from a Denison culture survey that we undertook a number of years ago now. That is the baseline for the development of the new operating model, and quite a lot of the people-related work in that, particularly around design of new management structures, as well as some of the more supporting activities such as the psychological supervision pilot. So I think there's a number of areas of priority that we'd already highlighted that we would be seeking to see how much progress we have made in terms of the organisational culture. I think we've got a really good opportunity to check that, because we've got this baseline piece that we did before we embarked on this big piece of organisational change. So I think absolutely we can look at what Police Scotland are doing and identify those measures which we should have in common, and make sure that we've got that reporting, so we've got that comparison that we can make. And then also part of that is the different challenges that we have in forensic services.
So that's really helpful. And I think also if there is, and I'm not necessarily saying it's ahead rather than not ahead, but actually if there's a part of the organisation that's slightly more ahead, then we can look at that, learn from it, and match across if necessary. So look forward to seeing how that all rolls out. Thanks, Fiona. Thank you, Chair.
Grand. And lastly, I've got Caroline Stewart, and then I'll move the business on. So Caroline, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again for this report. And I agree with all the conversations that have just been happening. And I suppose, Fiona, it's just to pick up on a bit of your point, because you raised it, and it was around that organisational culture piece. And when I was reading through this, one of the features that I've seen in my experience is of really performant organisations is that every single person is very, very clear about their own role in the organisation achieving its objectives. And so I just wondered when I was reading this, because I thought it's quite a good framework actually to be building into people's kind of PDRs. And I just wondered what the approach was going to be for that, because I think, getting everybody on the journey of what we're all here for and how are we going to measure success and how will we be successful is hugely important. So I just wondered what your thoughts were around that. Thanks.
I completely agree, Caroline, in terms of becoming a high performing organisation that's very much has a performance culture, requires right from the top of the organisation all the way through every layer to make sure there's absolutely clear objectives and those are closely aligned into team success, unit success, in the organisation success. I wouldn't say we're there yet. One of the key things which we're doing in the new operating model is changing our management, so changing the roles, taking away the distraction of being technically skilled and therefore continuing to do the caseworking. So we have focused now on professional management and leadership, and this is a key part of that. It's making sure that every member of forensic services has those conversations about what their objectives are and that they're absolutely clear how that then feeds in to the organisation's success. So that is very much a work in progress. I think the performance framework and the work that Vicky and others have done in developing this is really going to help with that, because people can really see the impact that they have across each of the different strategic objectives and the part that they have to play in achieving the success for the wider organisation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's very welcome if we're kind of moving in that direction, because I think it helps the whole sort of buy-in, especially when we're going through a period of change. People understand their role and what they're trying to achieve, and because everyone's important, and the most performant is when everybody feels that. It's not. Thanks.
Completely agree.
Thanks for that, Caroline, and thanks everyone else for the input. Vicky, have you got enough to take away for whatever you need to do to this before it goes to the board? And do you know roughly what the time scale is for going off to the board for approval and then subsequent reports and more detailed performance markers?
I think what I'll do, if you don't mind, I'll take that off table and have a further reflection on that, taking into consideration the points here today, and I'll provide a separate update with the action log on that.
Yeah, that's super. Thank you very much for that. Okay, if we can note this and the discussion that's taking place, and obviously, as I say, this will go off to the board for further discussion and approval. Colette has given me, taken me to task because I've forgotten to take the finance report. So I'll maybe take that now before we get on, because we've got a couple of reports relating to people in workforce planning. So maybe do the finance one just now, shall we? So that's Fiona Douglas. Sorry about that, Fiona. I'm completely
okay.
messing with everyone's heads today.
Just one moment till I just skip
Yeah,
back to the paper.
It's easier for me because I get them all in a bundle, so I can manage them more easily. But you poor guys have to open and shut multiple documents.
I have to admit that I have a paper version of the papers for this meeting, which is very poor for my environmental credentials.
I was just going to say that. Never mind.
Right. The finance update. So you have the period 11 report with the papers for this meeting. The year-end report is in the final stages of approval, so we'll have that for the next committee meeting. So in the previous period, though, as everybody is aware, that we have an agreed revenue budget for this year of 40.7 million for forensic services, a capital spend budget of 1.5 million, and also some reform budget support to align with activities that are set out within our transformational change programme. Also, as agreed with the Scottish Government, we have the funding now within the revenue budget for the post-mortem toxicology service, which was updated to 2.7 million of funding that's now captured within the revenue budget for forensic services moving forward. We also have commitment from Scottish Government around funding for outsourcing of drug driving cases, which we've already talked about as we've gone through that update. With regards to the period 11 report, we've got the Q3 net expenditure forecast was for an underspend against the budget of 0.5 million, with lower pay costs offsetting the higher non-pay costs. That lower pay cost really relates to the pausing of recruitment as we were in discussions around the budget for this financial year to ensure that we had sufficient funding within this year's revenue budget to be able to afford posts which we were hoping to have implemented last financial year. We have 0.4 million of non-pay increases which relate to additional drug driving outsourcing, which the Scottish Government has agreed to fund. So the actual spend to the end of period 11 was 0.4 million below the Q3 forecast, which, as I've said, was largely driven by non-pay underspends. The provisional indication for the year-end outturn is a 2.7% underspend against the revenue budget for forensic services, but as I said, that's still to be confirmed. With regards to capital, the actual spend to the end of February was 0.2 million below the forecast. However, again, provisionally, the actual end of year capital position is around about 0.9 million at year end. So it's a slight underspend against budget for a variety of reasons, including supply and also some pausing of capital spend to move into the following financial year. So those are all my comments, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions on the more detailed finance report that's included in the appendix.
Great, thanks for that. Can I just firstly add about the cash that's underspent? Where is it? What happens to that? Does that go back into the general SPA pot, or does that roll forward into the SPA to the forensic services budget for next year?
No, that goes back into the general pot that
Right.
that Police Scotland Finance will manage. So any underspends and overspends across different areas of Police Scotland, SPA and forensic services will be considered centrally.
Right, okay. Jane.
Thank you. And my question follows on directly from that, indeed, on the underspend. And you said a variety of reasons, but can you sort of pull out those reasons? And are they one-off? Are they recurring? Is there an expectation of the future? And as I hazard a guess, in seeing in other areas of the business, not just forensics, to what extent is this related to the availability of resources in respect of digital and in respect of planning and procurement for digital?
I'm not sure I can provide an answer in relation to digital specifically, Jane, because that's not part of forensic services responsibility. But in terms of the underspends, I mean, the primary underspend in relation to staff costs was around the deliberate pausing of recruitment. With regards to non-pay costs, I think we've had really excellent support from finance colleagues in the authority, and there has been an awful lot of work done around the demand forecasting, particularly around the maintenance costs that we have and making sure that they're profiled correctly through the year. So there were some third-party payments which were under the forecast, and that has impacted on some of the underspends. And lower supplies and services, so it's a lower than expected consumable spend. What I would say is that really good work that's been done in getting the forecast position to a better place during the last financial year. Chris, who supports forensic services within SPA Finance, has worked very hard with the senior management team in forensic services on the budget setting and also the phasing of spend across the quarters of the financial year for this year to come. I see Chris's hands up, so perhaps I'll let Chris help me out.
Good. Yeah,
well, and perhaps Chris could answer the question then. I absolutely hear what you say about the forecasting, but I wonder just if you can offer any comment at all, if there is comment to be made about their procurement process. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I think Fiona's kind of covered the main areas where the underspend occurred in terms of revenue. I'd just add as well, we've also talked about drug driving, the supplier turnaround time being longer than expected, which means we can't recognise some of the costs we expected till actually this financial year. So that's also quite a contribution in terms of the revenue underspend. In terms of capital, I think the impact of procurement on capital has been, there has been a small impact in terms of timing, but it's been relatively marginal. I think it's been more making sure what we put in the capital budget at the start of the year is actually the right time to get it in. So, for example, I think there was a toxicology instrumentation planned in, but with everything else, as we've heard in terms of toxicology development work, would it be right to buy that this year when there's all these other things going on to get the use of it? So I think there's been some impact, but not material, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does make sense. Thank you very much. So the impact of procurement is marginal, but other aspects, including the right choice, effective timing. Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I just ask on capital before I bring other board members in, Chris, or Fiona, when Fiona said that the cash goes back into the central pot, is that the case also for capital, that we have to make a separate case for it for next year if there's been slippage?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Right.
So we have a 1.5 million capital budget for this financial year.
Yeah, right. Okay, grand, thanks. Fiona McQueen and then Caroline. On that same theme then, Fiona, to understand whether or not there'll be any impact on your transformation programme because of that lack of use of capital?
No, there won't be. There's a very small amount of capital that's allocated to the implementation of the new operating model. There was capital investment required within some of our estate, particularly where we're bringing some of the search and recovery skills back into Edinburgh and into Aberdeen, which required some laboratory work to be done. Beyond that, there's a few instruments, so there's very little capital associated with change, so there's no impact on the change programme as a result of that.
Grand, thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that last answer, because that was part of my question, but it kind of related back to a piece of work, and it's probably, I don't know whether it's the right time to ask it, but I'd sort of put it down to ask it around about now, and that is around the cost to serve work. Do we actually have that? Because I'm thinking, how could we enrich this financial data in terms of that reporting going forward? And I think a large part of that is really understanding that kind of cost to serve model in terms of that overall budget. And I just wondered where that work was. I knew that was being undertaken by the SPA. Thanks.
I'll perhaps let Chris jump in first, and then I'll add to Chris's comment.
Please.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Chair. Yes, so Caroline, that is effectively, we talked about it before in terms of developing a unit cost view across the service. So that work is planned in from the SPA finance team point of view, and we've kind of kicked off. I've had meetings with the kind of business analyst and the forensic systems team to tie in with the performance data that underpins that report to make sure we're kind of using a consistent structure. So that work's underway, and we're kind of hoping to get some very initial results that we can use as quickly as possible, and then have a kind of framework that we then develop thereafter, and gives us the ability to effectively do scenario modelling and understand as demand goes up and down what that impact will be, and again just feed into particularly the budget we're going to start developing in 4 months' time. People will be delighted to hear. So
Thanks, Chris. And just to add to that, Caroline, we need to take a phased approach to trying to be able to answer the absolutely right question that you're asking there. There is data that we do have within the organisation which will take us some way towards being able to provide costs of the different services that Forensic Services provides. The later phases of that, though, we need that activity-based recording within Forensic Services so that we can actually see how much time each of the different activities is taking. That level of sophistication will have to come with a new core operating system for Forensic Services, because the current system would not allow us to capture that information.
Right, of course. I just think, that the move towards that gives us a very rich picture in terms of that business management piece, and that will help you in terms of this financial management, kind of where's your movers and your shakers in terms of things that you can move around within the year, in terms of, things if we're running off a bit piece in terms of not spending stuff. So
Alan Connell is leading on that for Forensic Services. So Alan, I'll perhaps invite you to make a few comments.
Yeah, sure. So we're operating in a different environment, in a different world, I suppose, from what a lot of people are used to. So very much your focus is on getting a 5-year plan pulled together for capital planning, for example, making sure that, every opportunity we can get to lean out the organisation and make efficiency savings, we're doing that. There's been a lot of quick wins, so we've identified, close to £1 million worth of opportunity that we're attacking at this moment in time in terms of the efficiency plan. That's landing quite well. Period 1 looks to be on track. Chris, I'm nodding to you to make sure that we're on the ball with that. But so there's a lot of work in terms of how we're operating now. It is different for people, and I accept that. But our people are embracing the changes that we're introducing, and a lot of the efficiency gains that we're making. So, Helen, who's on the call, is identifying some fantastic opportunities to reduce consumable spend, introduce new transformative processes in biology, for example, which has saved a significant amount of money, and we continue to do that. In my own space, business support and places like that, we're introducing targets with them now in terms of 5-year business plan saving opportunities every year, 12% consumable savings. So what I'm trying to do, Caroline, is to get our people to start thinking about how can we, make best use of our cash? How can we operate more in terms of how a business would operate? And I want them to come up with the plan next year so that it's not been done to them. They're actually kind of embracing that and kind of delivering on a lot of the change themselves.
I think that's very welcome, Alan. I really like that approach, and I especially like the 5-year kind of capital plan, because I know that Police Scotland's been trying to do this, looking into the future, because it always means life is life. There is always project slippage. Things don't go out the door when you think they're going to happen, but it means that you might have some projects on the stocks that have kind of are ready to go. That would mean if you had a slippage of a couple of 100,000, you've got some stuff right that you can just order right away, spend it in the year, just because this kind of money is going to be so hard to come by going forward, that anything that we've got in the pipe that you could bring forward in the event of slippage, because life is life, things happen. So, but it's just how do we make the maximum of any money that we are allocated, given the mind it's going to be a bit rarer to come by. So thanks, that's a good approach.
Thanks, Caroline. I agree wholeheartedly with that. The approach that we are taking is, for every pound that we can save, we'll reinvest it back into the organisation to move us towards that target operating model. So there's less of a reliance on us asking, and more of a reliance on us being self-sufficient. It's like any business, if you've got a drop in revenue, then there's two things need to happen. You have to either increase your revenue or make cuts in the organisation to try and deliver efficiencies. Chris.
Thanks for that. I'll give the last word to Chris, and then I'm going to move us on.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point that follows on from what Alan's saying is we are doing a refresh of the reporting, the report that comes to both the SNT and the committee. So the things that Alan's talked about, we're hoping to include, such as update on progress on the efficiency plan, but just if members have any other feedback they want to pass on, that would be appreciated.
Right, thanks for that. Now, the recommendations are that we're invited to discuss this, which we've done. Can I suggest then that we note this, the update and the questions that have been posed and the explanations, and that we move on? I'm going to suggest a short comfort break until 10 past, and then we'll move on to the people report and the strategic workforce plan, because there'll be substantial items. So if people can switch their screens off and come back in 10 minutes, or cameras rather. drifting back in, but we need to make sure we've got at least 3 board members before we restart, so we're quoted. And I'm sure Jane will join us in a moment. Right, Vicky, over to you for the next agenda item, which is the people report, and then we'll move on to the draft strategic workforce plan. So over to you.
Great, thanks, Chair. I'll take the paper as read, but the purpose essentially is to provide members with an overview of people-related matters and activities across forensic services. So first of all, just to point out that obviously, as per outlined in our strategy, we recognise that our people, highly qualified, trained scientific staff and support staff are our most important asset. This is set out in the background information there in the paper itself, but also just to say that our terms and conditions, our people policies and procedures, our core values and behaviours documentation, our competency and values framework, how we engage with our staff associations and also diversity staff associations is also worthy of note in terms of that really strong foundation to help support our people. So the paper itself highlights some key areas which I wanted to provide an update on. Firstly, around governance, section 2.1, and really this centres on our people board. So this has been a well-established board, as I mentioned earlier on in the meeting, and it really aims to provide that oversight and governance around all people-related matters. So essentially it links in very, very nicely with the strategic workforce plan that we'll come on and talk about, and that's going to be a key enabler to take this people board forward to the next level. Within the last 12 months, I would say we've had an additional amount of scrutiny on our recruitment decision making, and particularly with the financial pressures that we were facing earlier on in the last 6 months or so. So again, it's really important that we have that assurance. What I would also like to point out is the support from SPA in particular and Police Scotland. So from an SPA side, finance, risk and assurance. So it's making sure that the decisions and the discussions we're having highlight and take into consideration the financial position as well as risk management. So that's working well. And of course, Police Scotland, people in development are key there, whether that's around people policies, whether it's about changes within the systems that we use to manage our people, or whether it's around vetting and other activities such as equality, diversity, inclusion, which are obviously very much key. We have been monitoring our people plan, which was over the period 21 to 23. There's some key aspects there outlined, and at the moment we're in the position where we are redesigning our people plan for this forthcoming year, and I really wanting to promote more that mainstreaming of equality, diversity, inclusion and wellbeing, with a particular focus on practical activities and culture change. So that work's progressing at the moment. And the strategic workforce plan is obviously paramount to that. Section 2.3 covers leadership and management development. And again, as we've mentioned before, the new management roles that are coming into the organisation as we implement the operating model are really important, but it's really important that they have the guidance around the roles and responsibilities key aspects of what they will be accountable for in the new model, and particularly the capability team managers, first level of line management within the new organisation, and that real support for the people. I also just wanted to point out as well, from a leadership and management development perspective, that forensic services have been part of the Your Leadership Matters programme, which has been led by Police Scotland. And since that programme started in 2021, we've had about 15 senior leaders within forensic services participating. It's obviously ongoing again at this point in time as well, and we'll have about 40 mid-level managers across the organisation and participating in that going forward. That's a good news story there. Very much complements what we're doing internally as well. Also, in terms of point 2.4, the survey results and actions, we've covered some of this earlier as well in terms of our Denison survey that we did, looking at performance and that the culture of the organisation, but also the Your Voice Matters survey, as well as the sexism and misogyny survey, which we have participated in as well. So we're part of the ongoing Police Scotland steering groups and action groups around those areas, and absolutely want to mainstream that within our business plan and approaches as well. Operating model implementation is key in terms of supporting our people, and that's already been updated by Fiona earlier. And then the final thing just to mention around the health, safety and wellbeing of our people is obviously of prime importance to us as an organisation, and we have very robust, I would say, health and safety management and governance systems in place at the moment. They're well embedded, which supports the reporting into Police Scotland, the Health and Safety Board as well. We are at this point integrating post-mortem toxicology as a new area of forensic services into that way of working in terms of health and safety management. So essentially that's an overview, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that. Do we have any questions from board members? Fiona McQueen.
Thanks, Chair Vicky. Thank you very much for that. I absolutely welcome the intentional approach to mainstream EDI rather than have it as an add-on. I know that has its difficulties and challenges for particular protected characteristics, so I'm pleased to see that. Also pleased to see the wellbeing plan. I think my question is, how will we know? What about our people metrics? When will we get them? You know, how do we see that and see that progress?
Thanks, Fiona. Good question, and it links back to our earlier discussion as well about the performance framework in terms of the people metrics. The aspects around, for example, attendance levels within the organisation, they're well established. We have that information around, say, for examples, absence and the reasons for absence, and the longer term trend information that we have. So that's available just now. But back to how do people feel as part of the organisation, that culture piece, we would want to go ahead with a further staff survey. As Fiona mentioned earlier, we had a Denison performance survey that we completed. We've done that twice now, 2019 and just around the pandemic, so about 2020. So we've got that baseline data. So my approach would be that we move forward with a new people plan. We make sure that's communicated across our organisation well, that's embedded, and then at a point in the future, we will perform another Denison survey to assess our success or areas for further improvement.
Okay, and thoughts to how we push ourselves further in terms of you're measuring employee engagement, going deep into the organisation from a well-being point of view, and clearly you're looking at, I'm going to say, reflective practice, that psychological supervision in a small scale, but actually how do we take that forwards to the next level?
Thanks, Fiona. It's an interesting question. I can see Fiona's quickly put her hand up. I don't know if she wants to come in there first.
Yeah, Sorry, I think it's a really interesting area, Fiona, and it is quite difficult to measure. What we do have within forensic services is an established change agent network, and that is a group of frontline staff that have a variety of different roles, but one of which really is to allow us to get that test of, you know, how is organizational change engagement landing on the front line, what type of questions are being asked peer to peer within the organization, and there's good then feedback between the change agent network and the senior management team in terms of what's working, what's not working in terms of staff engagement, where are the levels of concern or issues, and recommendations again from people that are out there doing the job every day about how things could work better, particularly around staff engagement, growing trust between management and staff across the organisation. Those are quite qualitative things, though, in terms of how we measure it. I mean, running the Denison survey, I mean, it's a huge endeavour to run the Denison organisational culture survey, so that is something that we want to do again, but there is still an awful lot of work to do. Within the people board, we have presentations from first line managers that come back into the board that talk about the activities that they're undertaking at first line management level with the people in their teams to address some of the issues within the Your Voice Matters survey. Again, keen to mainstream as much as we can within the overall business plan activity. I mean, that's a general principle for most of what we're doing, and then using those different feedback mechanisms, both from first line managers into senior management, but also from the change agents, which are staff that are actually doing the job on the front line.
Okay, no, I look forward to seeing how all of that develops, because obviously we've got the people will be working till they're in their late 60s, or people are working till in their late 60s, and work's good for your health. So that creating that environment where staff can flourish in amongst the really challenging service that you're providing, I understand is challenging, but incredibly important. So thanks for that.
Victoria, did you want to come in this before I move on to Jane?
Yeah, just very quickly, just to say, I think one of the key aspects is around the engagement with our staff on an ongoing basis at the various levels across the organisation, and that messaging. So it's linking aspects such as around ED&I, well-being, and some of the actions that we're taking. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to translate what we're doing at a strategic level, organisational change level, and what that actually means and why. So it's about reinforcing, I feel, the messages as well. Thanks.
Jane.
Thank you. This is not a moment to go into this in detail, but I just wondered, of such a positive report, and there's a excellent framework and activity and things, the extent to which HMICS inspectors were cited of all of this. It may be an issue of timing, but I just query. Can you offer any thoughts on that?
In terms of the HMICS review, the recent review into toxicology, obviously there were aspects there in terms of people engagement, looking at various aspects which is called out into the report. In terms of any other reviews around people matters in general, I'm not cited on that. I don't know if Fiona has any further information on that.
No, not particularly at this stage, Jane. I think it's an area that we need to do more on.
Yeah, and it was a report simply on the toxicology side, not on the totality of things. Yeah, thank you.
Just before I come to my question, Colette, I think you've done something to the screen, so everyone seems to be in a theatre.
I've not touched anything at all. It's done it on its own. But see if everybody clicks view at the top.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have the option to click large gallery.
Large gallery, yeah. And is that if our partners who are broadcasting this could do the same, because I don't particularly want us being presented this way in the public screening of this. So yeah, no, it just came up saying that you'd done it, but you'd not. So it's you're off the hook. Right. I've got one question before I move us on to the strategic workforce plan, which is 2.4.1, which makes reference to the Your Voice Matters, but also to the sexism and misogyny surveys. So the latter says results in April 2023. Do we have any feedback on that, or is it too early to say? Do you have to do the analysis of that still?
I think Fiona wants to come into that one.
I'll take that one, Paul. So
Yeah.
I have been provided with the SPA Forensic Services results from the Sexism and Misogyny survey. There's a very small percentage of staff that participated in that survey from Forensic Services. However, absolutely committed to looking in detail at the results of the feedback that our staff have provided. We will be, again, looking at what actions we need to take within Forensic Services. And I think an opportunity for us to bring that together with other work that we're considering around the workplace incivility results in relation to the Your Voice Matters survey, and to make sure that we're absolutely committed to ensuring there is no sexism or misogynistic behaviour across Forensic Services. So we do have the feedback. We are looking at that, and we will be appropriately planning in actions as required to deal with that. But as I would say, it's a very small percentage of our staff that participated in the survey, but very powerful feedback that they have provided.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get some more information on that in due course. Okay, thank you very much for that. If we can note this report, and then that moves us on to the strategic workforce plan, which is on the papers as item 10, but we're taking in the public session. So again, I think that's you, Victoria, or Vicky.
That's myself, Paul, actually.
Oh,
That's
you.
going to be
I do beg your pardon. Sorry, my head is all over the place today.
That's
right,
okay, not to
Director.
worry. Okay, so we have presented to you today the latest draft of the strategic workforce plan. It is not a finished document, would be my first comments. It's an awful lot of work that we want to do and are committed to do in terms of producing a really effective strategic workforce plan moving forward. We have made progress to develop this. This is a second version really of our strategic workforce plan, but we are very aware that there is more work to do. The particular area that I'd highlight, well, there's two really, but the main piece of work that's required is really a piece around demand forecasting. So we need to work with our colleagues in Police Scotland and the Crown to get a proper, true indication of what the future demand forecast looks like for their requirements of forensic services. And those requirements are in terms of the volume of services and how we expect that to change over the next 5 years and beyond, if we could. Also considering the speed at which our work is required by our customers, and also the services and how those services need to develop over that period to provide what our customers need based in technology and how technology will change over that period. At the Forensic Performance Improvement Group meeting on Monday, myself, colleagues from Police Scotland and the Crown agreed to establish a short life working group. That short life working group will be looking at doing some detailed work on demand forecasting over the next 5 to 6 months. That will be looking at data that we have within forensic services systems, which is primarily the data that we have used just now to develop the plan as it stands, but also building into that some of the data that's now available through the new DPU reporting within Police Scotland, which I think is some really excellent information that we can make use of within forensic services. I'm also keen to develop the horizon scanning work that the SPA have undertaken, which is some really excellent work looking at a number of different facets and areas where we see societal changes and how we expect that to impact in the wider world of policing, but looking at that through a forensic science lens and really starting to understand, well, what does what do those different aspects of societal or other types of change mean in terms of how forensic science is going to change in the future, both in terms of volume of different types of evidence, different types of testing, and therefore the size and scale, complexity of the workforce that would be required to deliver against that. There's also more work to do around legislative and policy direction Again, we don't have a good visibility of forthcoming legislative change and how that's going to impact on forensic science provision. Certainly interesting legislation that's out for consultation with regards to the justice process right now, particularly in terms of sexual offences and how that could change moving forward. And that may well have a significant impact in terms of the speed of forensic science reporting within a changed justice system process. Alongside that, there's policy and process changes within the recently published Crown Office Strategic Business Plan, and also there will be changing aspects of policing focus and priority as a result of the financial challenge and the position that Police Scotland are in, and in terms of how they respond to those challenges and the services that they are able to provide, and therefore the consequence of that in terms of demand for forensic services. So it's a complicated picture, and we haven't got enough insight, I think, into that just now to have a really comprehensive strategic workforce plan that fully highlights the challenges over the next 5 years, that allows us to develop a really good plan about how we're going to respond to those challenges. But what does this report tell us? Well, it tells us that based on a calculated demand forecast, looking at the previous 5 years and extrapolating it forward, that there are some gaps that will grow within forensic services where we will not have sufficient capacity to service growing levels of demand. Whilst there are a number of those, I think the key areas are around Group 3 crime, which is your acquisitive type crime, and Group 5 crime, which is our drug-related crime toxicology in particular, and drugs driving legislation, which we have talked about at length today. So we know that we need to grow our capacity in those areas. The actions that we're taking really relate quite a lot to the operating model. Again, we've talked about a number of times this morning. So the operating model allows us to have that greater flexibility across forensic services to respond to changing levels of demand or peaks in demand in different areas. We also know that there's significant productivity improvements that will be delivered through a new core operating system, given the challenges of the current evidence management system in forensic services. And there is work ongoing in terms of what a business case around investment would look like for a new core operating system, and therefore what changes in productivity we would expect as a result of implementing such a change. And broadly speaking, from what the report tells us right now, is that for the next year we have sufficient capacity to meet current levels of demand. And to be able to do that within timeframes which have been acceptable, which may not be acceptable in the future, but certainly in the short term. The area that we have a challenge in is unsurprisingly toxicology provision, and that is subject to the long-term sustainable model and the need really for us to progress a decision around how are we going to look strategically at the issue of drug driving, and how do we respond in terms of building analytical capacity within the laboratory, or a model of a hybrid internal and external provision of services. So that's subject to a separate piece of work, and no doubt we'll have those detailed discussions as part of addressing the HMICS review on drug driving. So broadly speaking, I would accept that this report needs to be a lot more detailed and needs to have a lot more metrics within it. We have access to better people data than we have had previously through Police Scotland systems, but we need to have more visibility of that. And we need to work with colleagues in people and development to allow greater visibility of data in relation to the forensic services workforce that allows us to consider more issues around succession, retirement planning, the impact of the new operating model in terms of career progression, how we see our training develop, where we've got multi-skilling options, which we haven't got just now, but within the new operating model we will have, and how the benefits are realised, whether any of the assumptions that have been made through the operating model planning process have been right or wrong. I hope that the majority of them have been correct. We will start to see those benefits, but given the financial constraints that the organisation has experienced and will experience, the impact that that will have in terms of our progress in achieving the benefits in the timeline that's been set out. So in summary, the workforce plan takes us on a few steps. There is a lot more work to do, the focus, I believe, should be on focusing on the demand forecasting and getting an accurate picture of our customers' requirement from forensic services to ensure that we are building that service that they need within the constraints of the financial position, but also learning from work that is happening in England and Wales, where they have similar challenges around understanding a demand forecast for forensic science. And there's a lot of work going on down south that, again, I think we can take some learning from and perhaps also contribute some of our learning as we move through the next 5 months through the short life working group. So I'll pause at that point, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Fiona. Excuse me. So this morning we've got a report that's really just for a year.
Correct.
Or a plan that's for a year. And is it anticipated when the next plan is in place that will be for substantially longer?
Yes, I think within the next 5 to 6 months, as we develop the demand forecast, we will be able to pull together a more comprehensive 5-year strategic workforce plan that fully considers what the requirement is of forensic services in the long term.
Okay. And so this is a stopgap report, but hopefully we'll get something that's, you know, and it's not perfect, but by the time we get the next one, hopefully we'll have a bit more to that. Sorry, I've got a forest of hands up. I'm waffling here, so I'll maybe get, well, I'll get Fiona McQueen in first because you're chair of the People Committee. So I'll maybe give you first dibs and then Jane, if that's okay, Jane, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for that, Fiona. And the difficulty in producing something that isn't quite finished because you're waiting on other information is you've then got people offering you feedback that suggests actually we'd like to see, you know, more granular details, we'd like to see a plan, we'd like to see more data. But if you didn't provide it with us, we would say, well, have you not got something? So I understand that the challenge of providing something that in my head, and I think given what you've described, which has been very, very helpful, thank you for that, is a strategic approach to your workforce plan rather than necessarily a workforce plan. A couple of questions. So you're right, change is inevitable in terms of whether it's change of the criminal justice system, change in technology, change in society, and you need to be at the heart of that. I think you have to be commended with your ambition to continue to innovate, to stay at the forefront of forensic services. There are 2 or 3 particular things. So look forward to seeing more granular data and details of the plan in the coming months. I'm interested in the use of AI and increased mechanisation. So are we going to be as dependent on people, do you think, as we have been? I would like to see in the next iteration of it what career progression there is, so looking at the expert specialist roles, and I'm particularly interested in your approach to apprenticeships in terms of, and if you could help me understand that now, where you see that happening.
No, thank you, Fiona, and you will see more granular data as the work progresses. There aren't any plans around the use of AI within forensic science services at this stage. That's not to say it's not something that we absolutely should be digging into and looking at. Automated processing, though, absolutely is an area. We already have quite a lot of automated processing in our DNA service. However, certainly in toxicology is an area that we know that there's a role for more automated technology, and that's something we're actively looking at as part of the development of the technology roadmap within toxicology, and we will be developing roadmaps for each specific technology that we use across forensic services to see where we can use greater automation, because our processes are very much dependent on the value that our scientists add to them, and that's never going to change, but we can certainly make the process more efficient and effective through using better automated technologies and techniques. Career progression is an area that has been at the heart of the development of the new operating model. So the current structure of the organisation, we're just about to move into implementation. We have very generic roles, very broad roles, and there is very little career progression for people once they move, particularly into a scientist role descriptions. So there's a lot more opportunities for progression, both laterally and up the organisation in terms of roles and grades within the new operating model. So an opportunity for staff to do a lot more within their role, to be prepared and to train to progress into the next area. So there's a lot more roles in the new operating model to allow that progression to occur. Talking more specifically now about apprenticeships, but linked to that, the organisational design has been, well, it's been structurally designed to remove any barriers to progression within the organisation. So in theory, we could recruit somebody who's not been to university to get a degree into the organisation, and there's nothing structurally stopping them from progressing to becoming the Director of Forensic Services. And that's where the apprenticeships come in, because what we want to do is to look at an apprenticeship development pipeline that allows us to improve the diversity of forensic science, and it's an issue across forensic science, not specifically in forensic services, where we are recruiting from a population of people that have made big life choices, and as a result of that, the pool of people that we recruit from is not as diverse as the wider population. So using apprenticeships really gives us an opportunity to improve diversity by recruiting from a different group, and also to look particularly at underrepresented groups and looking at how can we encourage people that perhaps haven't considered a career in forensic science to join the organisation, to train through modern apprenticeships and to develop skills. That applies equally to existing staff, particularly in our support areas of the organisation, where they can gain recognised qualifications through a pipeline of training through a modern apprenticeship scheme. Now, we know we can't have graduate apprenticeships within forensic science because we would not qualify within the scope of the current structure. But what we will do then is we'll be looking for a way, and I'm not sure if this is possible at this stage or not, that through the use of apprenticeships, we can actually fund sponsorship for staff to gain a degree qualification, which is an absolute requirement for scientists because they need to be authorised to present expert witness testimony in court. So we would have an end-to-end process where a school leaver could join forensic services and train, gain recognised qualifications, and then if that was their wish, they could progress through a university course part-time whilst working and gain the full qualification. So I think apprenticeships is a really exciting opportunity for us to bring new people into forensic services, to improve the diversity of the organisation, and also to allow more structured career progression for the staff that already work, particularly around support roles.
That's really helpful, Chair. If I may just come back and ask about the modern apprenticeships, and is there an established relationship with local colleges, and are the MA programmes there, or are we starting at the beginning where we have to develop them in partnership with the college sector?
We are working on that just now, Fiona, with colleagues in Police Scotland that have been developing the apprenticeship programmes within Police Scotland. So I think we're pretty much going to have to start from scratch. But Alan's taken himself off mute, and Alan again is leading on this area for me. So perhaps Alan could jump in.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fiona. So we've already had conversations with Police Scotland, who are using us as a test case to try to get the apprenticeship model moving forward. We've met with Skills Development Scotland to strengthen that partnership that's already existing there between Police Scotland and those guys. So that's the route towards a modern apprenticeship. It's through Skills Development Scotland, and then they canvass colleges and universities on your behalf. So ultimately, the relationship would be then with them, Fiona, and then we progress it from there. So it's not as onerous as a first thought, bringing an apprentice, getting an apprenticeship model introduced. It's just, getting that will and that effort behind it to actually bring it to life. Jane, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
You're on mute, Paul.
Paul's on mute, but I was rather hoping he was going to call me in as the next person, so maybe...
I am.
Oh, gone off again.
Sorry, I've unmuted and muted myself. Great, thanks for that. It's just Jane, Fiona McQueen, was there any connection or anything you need to declare on that from the college sector at all?
if it's for me, then nothing I need to declare at the moment, other than both Caroline and I are involved in the education sector and would be happy to help.
Yeah, grand. Okay, Jane.
Yes, thank you. That has been absolutely fascinating. I'm going right back to the beginning to where you started, Fiona, both Fionas. But just to say, I very much welcome the strategic approach, the commitment, as we've been discussing, to more granular in due course. But absolutely critical is demand forecasting. And I just wanted to say how much I welcome, because I think we have possibly not across the board, not accorded enough consideration to legislative and policy changes, and there are some very big legislative changes for implementation possibly going through, which are going to have could have a significant impact, and a significant impact on forensics. So I very much welcome that explicit recommendation. It was something you may recall I raised actually when we were looking at the budget at the board as to whether we had sufficient resource allocated and capacity to deal with legislative changes, because we hadn't allocated anything additional. So I think it's definitely one to keep an eye on, both from a forensics point of view, but overall strategically for the SPA and for all of us in terms of the resource commitment that's required. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for those contributions, everyone. Can I ask then, Fiona, what would you like us to do with this today? Are we approving this? Because I think it's up for discussion rather than approval. But does it get approved by us, or does this go on to the wider board?
Colette, can it be approved by the committee?
Hi, Paul. No, we can't approve it here at the moment. We can just endorse it to go on ahead to the board.
Right.
But is it at that stage yet? It's not at that stage yet. So further work needs to be done behind the scene that should come back to the committee.
Right.
Before being endorsed to go to the board.
Okay. And how long will that take? Will that be the next meeting, or?
No, Paul. There's a lot of work that needs to be done around the demand forecasting to pull this into a proper strategic workforce plan. I would anticipate that if the short life working group runs for the next 5 to 6 months, then we would be looking at having a full strategic workforce plan that builds on that data set for next financial year. So It would be the committee meeting prior to the end of the financial year.
Well, in that case, okay. Jane, you've got your hand up. You wanted to come in at this point.
I have, and it was on that. I mean, I think although we're not formally endorsing it, we're certainly endorsing, I think, the approach. In that sense of small e, endorse the approach, the work to be done. But it was actually back to, if this is only a 1 year, but actually you're talking about the next financial year, what happens in this year? You need a pragmatic for this year.
Yeah, I think with regards to this year's capacity, what we're doing around the operating model, I mean, this is all mainstreamed into the business plan. And again, the performance framework that Vicky's described. So what I would hope is that you can see when we have the actual targets in the next performance report, you'll be able to see the capacity, the timeliness targets associated with the performance framework. So we'll be reporting against those, as well as through the change report, looking at benefits realization around the implementation of the operating model. I'm absolutely happy to provide an update on the demand forecasting work, probably the committee meeting after next, so that we should have an output at that stage, which should also align with discussions around the 24-25 budget setting cycle.
Okay, and can we make sure that, you know, that the people developing this are in close contact and discussions with our SPA colleagues, wider SPA colleagues who do have some expertise in this sort of area?
Yes, Paul. We've certainly had a lot of discussions with people in development, and in fact, I've neglected to thank Police Scotland people in development, in particular head of people engagement and partnering, who's provided us a lot of useful support and guidance in relation to the work that we have done so far, and continue to work with officers in the SPA as well as we go through progression of a range of things. This being one of them.
Okay, so if we endorse this today, and we'll get this back at some point in the future with a view to getting a future longer term strategy, probably not far behind that. So I'm kind of scratching my head wondering how long this plan is going to actually last for, if it's going to be 6 months before it comes back and then another 6 months after that, you know.
We'll commit to bringing the strategic workforce plan based on the demand forecasting output from the short life working group for the start of next financial year, so that we have something that we are working to from April of next year onwards.
Grand. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, if we can endorse this approach so far, and then we'll hear more about it in due course. Thanks very much, everyone, for your input on this. I'm going to move the business on then to the next agenda item, which is, where are we? Project Weaver Outcome Report. So I think that's Alan Connell. So welcome, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. It's a pleasure to meet you all. So I take it the paper is read, and I'll just pull out the pertinent matters if that's okay. I think this project is a shining example of what can be achieved when joint partnership working is embraced and done well. The project has been successfully delivered. The service has been transitioned across from December last year. Overall, the project got off to a slow start. This was mainly due to abstractions caused by COP26 and a lot of activity and a lot of resource demand in and around that space at that time. So it was off to a relatively kind of slow start. However, when we did get the right people involved, both SPA, Forensics and Police Scotland around the table, the project was properly resourced, and then things began to take real shape. The joint working was exceptional. Police Scotland, Estates, Digital, Change, P&D, Procurement, all pulling together with colleagues from Forensics as well. SPA were involved through information management, and at the end up, what was handed over was a modern 21st century toxicology laboratory, which is one of the few in Scotland that we have in and around that space. Great flexibility and partnership was also a key cornerstone of the project, and working with colleagues from the Crown and also the University of Glasgow. Also, one of the key aspects of the project was around the people. It was a big risk because we're transferring 24 people across from the University of Glasgow across to SPA. They were to paid across. As I said, it was a big project risk early on in the project. However, Gordon Brown and his people at P&D from Police Scotland were exceptional. And more importantly, our people transitioned across, and it was almost seamless. And I think, you know, when you consider the complexity of the project, the amount of different moving parts that were involved, I think it's a real success story. Subsequently, the laboratories went on to achieve UCAS accreditation quite recently, and well done to Craig and his team at Quality regarding that. There's been extensive lessons learned, however, as part of this project. What I've covered in the paper are more strategic lessons learned. However, there's been a full body of work in terms of the tactical lessons learned that was undertaken by Joanne Tierney's team in Change. And a lot of those lessons learned that I've covered in the paper look at, for example, the initial building scoping, which was BioCity, which was the wrong choice. Subsequently, that put the project on the back foot when we first started it. We had to go to a kind of consultancy firm called Avison Young, who then carried out a kind of search along what properties were available in the kind of West of Scotland area. Junction 24 in Govan was identified. Again, Junction 24 had its sites because it's mainly an office building, so we had to convert that into a modern laboratory. So when you're looking at waste disposal, you know, drainage and things like that, there was this extensive piece of work which went into actually making that the laboratory what it is today. It was a real learning experience for our estates people, because they're not used to kind of building those types of labs. So a bit about my background: I worked at the University of Glasgow as ops director years ago, and you know, building and refitting labs was just part of the job. It was a week-on-week thing. However, at the police, it was an extensive piece of learning that was required to be undertaken regarding that, because it's not something to be done every day. So again, there was a lot of learning in and around how we actually the estates managed that, but we came up with it, and what we've delivered is a fantastic facility. digital division, again, that really stretched the digital team, because we had, I think it was 14, 15 instruments that had to be networked. And when we're networking those instruments, those are commercial instruments, which are really, really sensitive, and we're bringing them into a secure, kind of real secure network, which made it very difficult for Police Scotland digital team. Plus, they were also dealing with instrumentation that was £1 million kit, for example, which had never dealt with before. So it was a real period of learning for the guys there. But again, they overcame those barriers and hurdles, and everybody done it working together. So I think it's a huge cornerstone and a huge landmark for forensics. And when you look at, Junction 24 landed, the taxing unit landed, it's all positive stuff that's happening in and around this space. So I'm really, really pleased with how that project ended up and the progress we're making. And I'll invite any questions you've got regarding the paper.
Great, thanks very much. Questions from board members? Right, I'll kick off because I've got 2 or 3 things I just need a bit of assurance on. So you bear with me as I try and find them. So 2.21 makes reference to delays in equipment. Now, you describe these equipments in the report as workhorses of the services. So can you just assure me that the instruments are now being used and are fully functional? And also, what's the consequences for service delivery and current caseloads because of these delays?
Yeah, so I would say 90% instrumentation is actually live at this moment in time. We had some items of kit which required some of the snagging work to be undertaken, Chair. So there was additional snagging works which had to be undertaken by estates, which then had to feed in with the digital team to then get the equipment networked. So there were some items which were late in getting installed. The delays were caused basically by the economy at that time and the supply chain issues that we had. So we're bringing a lot of this kit over from, for example, overseas. So there were delays in terms of how it was actually procured, and then the supply chain knock-on effect regarding that. Overall, the laboratory is still undertaking a lot of work in terms of testing, validation and methods, but I've seen an email today from the team there and they're making good progress regarding that, so I don't have significant concerns.
Grand. Okay, 2.15, you make reference to networking issues and backing up complex data. Can you tell me if there's any risks associated with this and what mitigations are in place, and also what that means in terms of disaster recovery and risk to data?
It's more, Chair, it's more around ordinarily in any organisation, your network is your own, so you're working your own network, your own instrumentation. But here, unfortunately, we're relying on, for example, Police Scotland, who then rely on BT. So there was an issue with some of the data where it was getting passed to a BT terminal in the west, but it was actually getting routed through the east by BT. So therefore, the data was actually, believe it or not, taking longer to get from Govan to the East Coast terminal to come back to Govan, and that's how it's getting routed back and forward. So it's not a closed network. We're actually involving a third party with that. So what we've had to do is speak to BT to make sure that that's getting routed to the West network, and then it's getting fed straight back. But those are kind of more granular tactical issues that we've been dealing with on the ground.
Great, thanks very much for that. I don't see any other hands raised from board members, so can I just say thank you very much for that. It's been a really it's a tricky project to get right, and it's really been very gratifying that it's landed so cleanly. So congratulations to everybody from the top of the organisation downwards that's been involved in that. Caroline, are you coming in for a question?
No, it was really just to add to that. I didn't really have any questions on the paper. But just to say well done to everybody.
Yeah.
So.
Here. Okay, I'm going to move us on then to the next agenda item. If you bear with me as I just check, because I've missed bits in the past. So that's Project Weaver Forensic Services Change Programme Update. And we've got Joanna Tierney. So Joanne Tierney, I beg your pardon. Joanne, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. As with my previous colleagues, I'll take the paper as read and just pull out a few key highlights. The change programme, the Forensic Services Change Programme, is a series of specific key projects that are designed to underpin the successful delivery of our refresh strategy. The current change programme projects that we have on the go at the moment are access to laboratory services project, our deployment of scene examination project, the operating model, our core operating system project, and the data governance project. Page 3 of the paper gives a high-level milestone plan of where we are against delivery of those key projects, and we are tracking positively against that milestone timeline. Our Access to Lab project, which was concerned with the design and development of a new submissions process for our requests for the production of evidence from our colleagues in Police Scotland and Crown Office, went live in January of this year. This was, again, like Project Weaver, another example of excellent collaboration between Police Scotland, Crown Office and ourselves in order to get the format of our new standard forensic instruction agreed and implemented, and we're now have formally closed that project, moving into post-implementation review, lessons learned and benefits realisation tracking. As previously mentioned by both Fiona and Vicky, our tasking unit went live in April, which we are already seeing the benefits of, and that's moving in again to post-implementation review, lessons learned and benefits tracking to be reported on at a later date. In terms of the operating model project, we successfully transitioned some staff contract changes in our phase 1 release of that. We have done several update and engagement sessions with our people, which Fiona and Vicky again have referenced, and we are now moving on to a really exciting phase for the operating model project, which is engaging with our people in a series of workshop designs around how we will make the best of our operating model structure and manage our workflow through that new structure to maximise our efficiency and effectiveness of the resources that we have available to us. So as I say, we remain on track with the key operating model milestones. In terms of the core operating system project, we presented a draft report or a draft business case to the committee. We received some feedback on that, and we are working on updating that draft, and we remain on track for delivery of that initial business case to the Resources Committee in June of this year. Again, engaging with our colleagues in Police Scotland, ICT, the COS programme and finance colleagues as well. So as I say, the IBC for that will be presented to the Resources Committee in June, and then pending the outcome of that, be formally set up as a project to move forward to full business case. Our final project is data governance. This is around the area of delivering a data governance strategy for the relevant electronic data that we have retained within SBA Forensic Services. We're working closely with our partners and information compliance specialists to make sure this project delivers on the requirements to allow us to maintain our legislative compliance around our data governance in that space. We also, within the remit of the change programme, we have other change activity that is related to our research, development and innovation capacities. We seek to build and work towards setting up a research, development and innovation strategy. Recent successes in that area is we have now procured facilities for fire investigation training, working with our collaboratively with our partners in the Fire and Rescue Service to set up utilize shipping containers to set up a fire investigation training facility, which will provide invaluable resource for training staff and also a platform on which to build future research collaboration activity with our academic partners. Operation Claris, again, is something that Forensic Services is keen to support, working alongside the University of Dundee and a range of other academic resource organisations across Europe. This is around building clarity and preventing bias in digital forensic examination. It's relatively light touch for our Forensic Services resource. We're operating as a consultative capacity because of our expertise in this area of mitigating against bias in forensic examination. And I'm happy to take any questions on the change programme update report.
Great, thanks for that. We've touched on a number of these items and other agenda items as well, so but there are other things there. So I've got a question from Caroline, or comment from Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Joanne, for your report. Very comprehensive. I guess and I look forward to seeing the cause IBC good resources in June, so I'll be interested to read that. I think my question is really around capacity. And we're certainly seeing this buffing up in a lot of Police Scotland projects, that capacity and availability to do these big sort of set piece change programmes. And you've already sort of alluded to that around the cause replacement. And so I guess my question is, what are we doing to kind of mitigate that risk? Because for me, that's quite substantial. And given that we've got so many pieces of our puzzle kind of depending on this sort of replacement, I'm just wondering, do we have a plan B and what does that look like? Because I think even if you get it approved through resources, getting it started is going to be another thing altogether. Thanks.
So with regard to the core operating system and plan B, working alongside Alan, we're identifying a lot of efficiencies in how we are addressing our use of our current systems that we've got. The core operating system is absolutely fundamental to underpinning the success and the benefits realisation associated with our operating model. Were we not to be successful in securing authority to progress that, we would have to reframe the time frame for the realisation of the benefits associated with the operating model, and it would take us longer to deliver on that. But we are working hard to minimise and mitigate against risk associated with the system that we've got at the moment. I see Fiona had her hand up.
Yeah, I'll just bring Fiona in. Fiona Douglas.
Thank you. Caroline, it's an absolutely relevant point, and it's more than just the funding to purchase a system. Absolutely, I think we need to be pragmatic in our approach. I mean, there's different levels of complexity in terms of systems, but it is quite critical that we have a replacement for our core operating system, not only from a productivity and efficiency perspective, but also because our systems, a number of them, and particularly as we move to more automated processes, are absolutely dependent upon this. The system that we have is 10, 11 years old now, and the amount of data that sits within that, as well as the way that system works, it's coming to end of life, I would say. And we absolutely need to replace it. So this is going to be some difficult conversations, I think, to have in terms of both the investment in a challenging economic climate, and also how we approach the implementation and what support we bring into the organisation to facilitate that. Because we are a very pure operational organisation. We don't have a lot of non-operational staff. We don't have all of the support structures that sit within Police Scotland, for sure. So we need to make sure that we set ourselves up to succeed, and that we bring it in a phased manner that addresses the core priority areas initially, and then we build on that. So any approach, for example, around integration of systems would have to be done in a sensible fashion. But certainly we need to have integration with Police Scotland systems. We have had discussions which are noted in the action register in terms of what we talked about in the last committee, about Police Scotland costs. So there are things that we would need to look at, and absolutely will look at after the resources committee in June, and we can get a feel for whether that's can progress. And I think if it does get approved, then going out to market, and we did do some market testing a year or two ago, so we have a good idea about what is out there. But if we do get approval to progress, then I think we'll be able to see if there's plan Bs out there that we're perhaps not even aware of.
Well, yeah, because so sorry, I maybe made my question sound wrong. It was maybe about whether you get permission or not from the resources committee, whether it gets approved or not. I'm kind of assuming that it will go through. What I'm thinking, because we're seeing this happening in Police Scotland time and time again, is that things get approved, but there isn't the resource to get them mobilised thereafter, and that's the bit that's concerning me. So I think you could get the approval, but then how are you going to immobilise it? And that's where I'm thinking about plan B, because if we're struggling for these kind of resources on these projects, And that's the bit that I think is going to buff up against us in terms of those timelines. And that's where I'm thinking about a plan B, purely because I just know that resource is so thin on the ground and hard to get. And that's where my risk for this project really lies at the moment. Thanks.
I completely agree, and our capacity for change is something we're very aware of in terms of the absorbability of change in the organisation. We are reducing our number of change projects and programmes as we complete things, which is, I think, quite a positive place to be, and also the discipline internally in the organisation at stopping doing other activities and really make sure we've got a strong approach to prioritisation, both in terms of our strategic intent, but also in terms of maximising the available capacity and not trying to do too much.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's just making sure, once you get these projects approved, it's getting them going. And that's where we're finding there's a bit of a bottleneck, just when it's down to physical bodies, really, rather than anything else. So thanks.
I'm going to give the last question to Jane, and then I'll move us on because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you. There's less of a question, more of an observation, because I think Caroline has made the point very cogently. My concern is not with the principle, but it's with the implementation. And having actually had a very good briefing from Police Scotland recently on their core operating system, I think one's aware of the benefits, but also the challenges. And I would say particularly whatever system we're going to be adopting, the data migration. It is going to be, it's a one-liner or a one paragraph in here, but it's a major project in itself. So that is it. It's more in terms of the risk of timelines and the risk of capacity than it is about the principle, which I think is really very clear and compelling. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Joanna, you wanted to come in.
Just to provide reassurance, I appreciate that it's a one-liner and a small paragraph on the data migration issue, but there is a wealth of work of many years in the making sitting behind that. So we would be very well able to articulate our data migration requirements, both as part of the data governance project in any future tender process. So it's not underestimated at all, just to provide that reassurance.
I'm sure you haven't underestimated the requirements. It's whether we have the capacity to meet them. But yes, thank you.
Grand, thanks for that, and thanks for those questions and observations. So we're invited to note the progress of the Forensic Services Change Programme, which I think we've done. That moves us on to the last substantive item of the public agenda, which is digital forensics. And we have got, bear with me 1 second, from Police Scotland, Chief Superintendent Conrad Trickett. So welcome, Chief Superintendent Trickett.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, committee, and everyone in attendance. Thank you. The report brought to you today is our 6 monthly report to the committee. It's by way of an update on our progress in relation to the ISO accreditation for our digital forensic services within Police Scotland. We have attached last December's report to the report just for reference. It provided a bit more of the detail and the timelines and so on of the overarching project and piece of work. The front report for today is really just quite a simple update report in relation to that. From my perspective, you'll remember last time I presented, I hadn't actually formally taken on the role. So I'm delighted to say I did start in the role in January as planned, and that's me a number of months now into the programme of work, and obviously getting a greater and greater understanding of all the different projects within the programme as we go on, of which ISO 17025 is one of them. I chair the project board, which is established with all stakeholders to govern at the first stage of governance of the project and the timeline. You'll remember that the focus at the moment is very much on Muggy Moss in Aberdeen. We have 5 centres to go through the accreditation. We're starting at Muggy Moss. But it's important to note that all the background work in terms of SOPs and processes and procedures that need to be documented and articulated for ISO accreditation, whilst they're being completed by the team with a focus on Aberdeen, they are of course then applicable across all 5 sites and being rolled out through the business as usual process. It's very much a collaborative approach. So we have the business as usual staff that have a very, very busy day job. Digital forensics has huge demand on it and an ever increasing demand. So we need the support of business as usual. We have the actual quality management team that will be the lifetime management team of the ISO accreditation process as we go through. And we also have the project team that's supporting both business as usual and the quality management team in actually developing the products and processes and so on that will meet ISO accreditation. Important sort of landmark for us since the last time we met was we had a visit from the Forensic Capability Network, which is England and Wales, and with a lot of experience around ISO accreditation. They came up just last week and to Muggy Moss in Aberdeen and spent 2 days with the team there. Initial sort of verbal feedback has been positive, but we are going to receive a written report from them, which will give us a really good steer as to where we are in terms of our being fit for purpose for the ISO accreditation. The timeline that's attached to December's report and is there for reference, we're on track with that timeline. We're working with UCAS at the moment in terms of they're very busy across the UK and we need to fit in with their timings as well, but we're on the timeline for February next year is when we hope to receive the first lot of accreditation for the Aberdeen site and then moving on from there. And that's probably how I'll leave it at the moment. It is quite a simple update paper, lots of work going on in the background to assure you of that, governed through my project board and the programme board above me, and we'll keep reporting every 6 months if that's appropriate for yourselves, just to keep on track with that timeline, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that, and thanks for the report. I've got Jane first, and I'll maybe come in with myself after that.
So thank you very much, Conrad, and it's very good to see that progress. I mean, nothing to report is exactly what one wants in that sense. I think my question, and it may not so much be for you, but my observation of this is we now have an extended timeline. It was originally going to be 2024. I think we're now to 2026, where forensic services role, if you think about the origin of this, is almost on a consultancy basis, is because of the experience of assurance and accreditation. So I think my question is, at what point does it become completely business as usual, absorbed into your mainstream, and at what point, if any, does it become appropriate to move across from forensic services into Police Scotland business as usual? And there may not be an answer to that now, but I think I'm putting that on the table as a thought.
I have having similar thoughts. I suppose, Jane, is probably my response in terms of so let us assume that we gain accreditation in February of next year with the Aberdeen site and are then working through the other 4 sites. The UCAS team come back every 6 months to check on progress once you've got accreditation. So that business as usual kind of quality management approach will be in place and will be instigated, and will have to, and indeed Aberdeen will re-accredit during the time frame of the accreditation of the other sites. So there's absolutely a need to create the capacity in the quality management business as usual team to deliver that ongoing accreditation at the same time as making sure the learning from the sites has been put in place, and indeed we keep future-proofing the other sites as well. So it is quite a complex juggle that we're going to need to plan for and put in place, and over that kind of, because it never ends, of course, is probably the point you're making, that this will keep going, and not only in terms of the locations and the accreditation and the reviews and the re-accreditation and so on, but also, if you remember, what we're focusing on at the moment is mobile phone technology, in terms of a number of the tools that are used for the mobile phone extraction, which is about 80% of the work that is done. But clearly we want to, the future vision here is that every tool we use is fully accredited in every type of examination that we conduct. That's the ultimate goal. And so there are sequences that need to be planned in, as well as doing the business. So when it becomes appropriate for it to be governed through more of a business as usual update, I'm not sure what the answer to that bit of it is, but we're very alive to the challenges and the complexity of what we're trying to achieve.
And it's sort of back to demand forecasting, because even that 20% at the moment is the known unknowns, as it were. But in fact, give it another 3 or 4 years and there will be other technology of which we are not yet aware to which this will apply. So there will be incremental, at the very least, if not, as I read somewhere, surge growth in this to be absorbed into the system. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Conrad, for this report. And I guess just sort of, I have nothing really to add to Jane's point, except for when I was reading this paper, I was thinking, is the reason it's here in the Forensics Committee because it's got the word forensics in it, and is that the right place for this to sit? And I think there's a sort of question in my head, which is this the right place? Is forensics the right place? Is digital forensics going to be part of forensics going forward, or is it going to be part of Police Scotland? And if it is, should it then come under the governance of the other kind of things that we have in kind of train within the SPA? So it's more of a question probably to take offline, but it was the question that went through my head. But hugely supportive of the direction of travel that you're on with this, Conrad. So thanks.
I think if I may, Chair, I mean, because the answer to that, Caroline, came out of the digital forensics working group. That was an interagency working group that was chaired by Bob Hayes, if you remember, and I was comment. So the answer to why is it here is precisely in that consultancy space, in that assurance. And you're right, to some extent, the word, if you took out the word forensics, I mean, the issue is actually the emphasis on the quality assurance and the accreditation, I think, where forensic services as currently certainly has an expertise.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely right, especially with this UCAS stuff, because that absolutely is forensics, kind of absolute meat and drink to forensics. I suppose it's just where does this sit governance-wise going forward, and is this just coming because of this piece of this, or is this where digital forensics is going to sit, I guess, is my wider point.
The last word on this to Fiona Douglas. Fiona.
Yeah, just briefly wanted to come in and I obviously the issues of governance is not one for me. However, what I could comment is that I think there are shared challenges around digital forensics and physical forensics, and certainly the issue around regulation, I think, is an interesting area. I mean, this is accreditation and making sure that we've got the assurance processes in place, which help, I'm sure, Conrad and certainly helps myself sleep at night that the work being done in the organisation is at the required standard. I think that the interesting evolution that's going on down south is the statutory powers for the forensic science regulator, and some of the potential risks, perception risks, I believe, around standards that differ then between Scotland and other parts of the United Kingdom will be similar for digital as they are for the work of forensic services. So I think from a standpoint of risk and regulation, I think there are synergies there that it's useful for the committee to be cited on from both the traditional forensics and digital.
Is there an approach that's been taken down south, Fiona, in terms of this? Is it being rolled into forensics as a whole?
No, it's that's not the plan. There is a review going on down south at the moment around the structure of digital forensics on the back of an HMIC FRS report that was recently published around digital forensics. But I don't think there's any decisions that have been made. But the report there does talk to sharing learning and best practice around traditional areas. I mean, forensic services has been accredited for 20+ years,
Correct.
Craig, I know, has been supporting the work that's going on with the quality team that's been established in digital forensics, and I would seek that we continue to share that best practice. So I think it's from my perspective, I think it's valuable for the committee to be cited on those similar issues that cut across the wider piece.
I completely agree with that, and I suppose then my wider point is where does the sort of governance of the wider piece go? Is it in here or is it elsewhere?
That would be a board decision. So I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, sure.
So it's maybe a discussion to have in the future.
Yeah.
Because we've still got 1 or 2 items in the private session, albeit I don't think they'll take too much time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Fiona. Okay, can I suggest then that we move on? And I've just a couple of quick things before I close the public meeting. I've just a note that I've just had a quick note saying that Derek Scrimmager has advised that his name's missing from the list of attendees in the 1st of February meeting. So I'm going to ask Colette if you can update the approved minute accordingly. And lastly, the action log, we had the one open on performance. Are we content to close that or to keep it ongoing rather? I think it was. So we're okay with that. Thanks, Fiona, for that, Fiona McQueen. Okay, is there anything else then before I close the public meeting? Could I suggest then we close the public meeting? We've got the